Chapter 508. The loyal hymn of the Wuxia Knight was a complete joke, but it still represented a new form of art. It was applauded by the town officials. Wow, what a great performance. What a respectable Wuxia Knight. He should be a role model for all territorial knight. Gort said loudly. When Wuxia fought with the bandits, I felt my blood boiling. If there were bandits in Flower Town, I would definitely pick up a spear and fight them. Defense Officer Nimmo vowed. In fact, he was just a trainee knight. The more he ate, the fatter he got, the harder it would be for him to ride a horse. Ms. Avril's performance deserves my applause. She is very beautiful. Having a wife like her is the source of Wuxia's hard work. I like this play. Yes, play. It's not as funny as burlesque, but I really wish I was Wuxia Knight. Unfortunately, the fighting scene is ugly. They don't even know how to use chi. Don't be too picky. Burlesque actors are just ordinary people. They don't have chi at all. List was very surprised by the response. He thought that the play would be popular, but he didn't expect such a poor play to receive applause and praise. It could only be said that there was a lack of entertainment in this world. Music and dance have developed. The status of a pianist is comparable to that of an aristocrat. Ballroom dancing is also a necessity for aristocrats. However, more entertainment is still an urgent need for aristocrats. The same is true for civilians. Such needs can't be satisfied by old-fashioned burlesque. The birth of the play has a basis for popularity. It seems that the play will soon be popular. Should I let them explore and develop on their own, or should I give them a pointer or two? The smoke mission has been completed. List's enthusiasm for the play has suddenly dropped by 50%. I should give them a pointer or two. You can't do things anticlimactic. Avril was summoned and List began to give pointers. He didn't know much about the play, but at least he knew what the form of modern play was, how to design the content, how to design the transition, and how to naturally immerse the performance, as well as stage props, lighting applications, and even adding chi and magic unique to this world. However, such a stage play was expensive. There was no need to complicate it until the play matured. After instructing the Black Horse Island Drama Company, he had time to care about new tasks. Mission. The number of serfs in the territory is increasing rapidly, and at the same time, the number of children who have lost their parents is also increasing rapidly. The boarding system is no longer able to sustain so many children. Children are the future of the territory. As the lord of the territory, he should establish an orphanage to provide them with a good education. Reward: 1 sprite worm. The reward was a sprite worm that List liked. The content was to build an orphanage. He did not hesitate. We do need to build an orphanage. As the children grow up, they must feel the Lord's care for them. Only then will the future orphans be loyal to me when they grow up. In actuality, many overlords would build orphanages to gather orphans in their territories. Orphans were raised well, and their loyalty was much higher than that of ordinary citizens. It was reasonable. List had to build an orphanage. He assigned the task to Gort. Consultant Gort, choose a suitable site around the port town of Black Horse Island. I want to build an orphanage. This orphanage should be able to accommodate all the children in the territory and be equipped with combat teachers, serpentine teachers, and craftsman skills teachers. My lord, I will go and build an orphanage. Waiting for Gort to leave, List was still contemplating. The buildings that needed to be built in the territory were obviously not only new castles, mage towers, and orphanages, but also facilities such as the Knight Academy, Town Hall, Sentry Tower, Square, Theater, Hospital, Water Plant, Exchange, and so on. He was not an ordinary lord who allowed the city to develop in feces and urine. He not only wanted to build a modern castle but also a modern attached city. Although there was no intention of revolution, the basic welfare of the people still needed to be paid attention to. At least the serfs of Black Horse Island should be able to live a stable life and no longer be hungry and cold. They could also be treated when they were sick. Serious illnesses may not be treatable, but minor illnesses must be treatable. However, the road needed to be taken one step at a time. At this stage, the main problem of the territory was to solve the clothing, food, and housing of the serfs. Clothing, food, and housing can be arranged by the officials. I will first plan the orphanage and the Knight Academy system. Call the main officials of the territory and the Earth Knight for a plenary meeting. His attitude was to do what he said. The next day, the meeting was held in the port town office of Black Horse Island. The office had a conference hall dedicated to meetings. It was large enough to accommodate 80 or 90 people. There were 79 Earth Knights in the territory, including 12 elite Earth Knights. Today I have called you to the meeting. The topic of the meeting is the construction of the orphanage and the Knight Academy. The purpose of the orphanage and the Knight Academy is clear to everyone. It is to train the future knight for the territory. Therefore, I hope to build a complete knight training system in the territory. The meeting did not last long. Referring to the practices of other territories, a new system was quickly developed. The Knight Academy, as the main training institution for knight, includes a full set of teaching content for training a knight. In fact, as early as Liszt had not discovered Black Horse Island, he had already secretly established the Knight Academy. This time, the teaching staff and construction specifications of the Knight Academy were all properly arranged. Liszt naturally served as the dean of the Knight Academy. The port town consultant Gort and the elite Earth Knight Marcus served as the deputy dean respectively. In fact, Marcus was the chief deputy dean who presided over the daily work. The Knight Academy offered loyalty lessons, chi lessons, war lessons, administration lessons, art lessons, navigation lessons, and culture lessons. These were known as the 7 Knight lessons. The Knight Academy has an orphanage, which is responsible for the adoption and teaching of orphans. The Craftsman Academy, which is responsible for the training of handicrafts, agriculture, and commerce. The Apprentice Academy, which is responsible for the early education of children. The Administration Academy, which is responsible for the training of territorial administrators. And the Elite Academy, which is responsible for the communication and management of the elite Earth Knight. At this point, the structure of the 7 courses and 5 academies of the Knight Academy on Black Horse Island has been formed. In this way, it will continue to provide talents for the territory. Among them, the Craftsman Academy and the Administration Academy are advocated by Liszt. The Craftsman Academy will be independent of the Knight Academy, and will hire craftsmen from the territory to teach civilian apprentices. After learning, they will be directly assigned to work. The Administration Academy is for those knight who are not talented in cultivation. They will undergo a period of administrative training before taking up their posts to familiarize themselves with territorial affairs. In the past, the knight's method of charging and dismounting was more crude. Liszt hoped that the knight would specialize in charging and advance to a regular soldier, while the administrative officers would specialize in administration and be promoted as officials. Of course, after a regular knight retires, he would also enter the ranks of officials and receive preferential treatment. At the same time, Liszt also stipulated that important positions among officials could only be held by nobles. Important positions mainly referred to consultants and administrative officers. At this stage, the number of nobles was an urgent need, so in addition to Gort, the administrative officers of each town could only hold the title of acting. Chapter 509. Mission completed. Reward, a thorn worm. When Liszt was riding the chocobo Loki, who had learned levitation, flying in midair, the changing smoke appeared in front of him, indicating that the mission had been completed. The orphanage had been temporarily established. The requirements for the smoke mission were not strict. Many of the contents were similar to a reminder. Once noticed and started to execute, the mission was considered completed. Another thorn worm? Liszt's eyes lit up. The day before yesterday, he had contracted the thorns worm that was bred from the last reward and moved the worm stock to the thorns garden planned in the yet-to-be-built Thorns town. The breeding of 2 thorns worms in a row will greatly increase the output of my thorns magic potion. Very good. Patting Loki's stretched neck, Liszt shouted, "Loki, go to the thorn garden." The Garden of Thorns was the flower town's Garden of Thorns. Clatter. Loki responded cheerfully, flapping his wings, turning his body, and flying at a steady speed to the thorn garden next to the dairy farm. A light wind attribute magic was holding Loki's body, making it as light as a feather, so that he could rely on his wings to realize his dream of flying. Levitation was a high-level wind magic, an advanced magic of Lighten. Lighten was a magic that magicians would study when studying wind magic. It condensed wind attribute magic to lift themselves or other objects to reduce weight. This was a very practical magic. Magicians liked to rely on Lighten to climb mountains or carry heavy objects. But Lighten was just an ordinary magic, it could not let people fly. On the other hand, its advanced levitation spell had the ability to fly. It could condense a ball of wind elemental mana and hold itself or other objects in the air as if it was floating. This magic was very difficult. It was difficult for a great magician to learn it. It was comparable to the invisibility of light magic. Loki, on the other hand, extracted the information of the magic array from his blood, so that he could easily master this magic and truly fly in the blue sky. Unfortunately, levitation allowed Loki to fly, but lost the speed of running on the ground. Even if Loki flapped his wings, his speed was only equivalent to a sparrow. Moreover, levitation had a time limit. It would collapse every 15 minutes and needed to be recondensed. In 15 minutes he could not cross the sea, let alone the sea between Black Horse Island and Flower Town. However, he could fly from Port Town to Mangrove Island. He could also fly from the Nameless Castle to the Garden of Thorns. After landing, List directly used magic eyes to look for new thorns worms. The Garden of Thorns was basically filled with magic potions that had mana retroaction. It was a little difficult to find it, but he still found it after half an hour. Carefully protect my worm stalks. Once the thorny thorn worm is born, immediately notify me. He ordered the worm protection team. The insect guards replied in a clear voice, "Yes, Sir Lord." Satisfied, List left. At this point he had 3 lesser sprites, 29 sprite worms, as well as the 5 contracted sprite worms of a chi in her. Such wealth had already far surpassed that of an ordinary viscount, and the potential for development was enormous. He was still a little short of the Count's wealth, but he believed that he would soon catch up. Whether it is my strength or my elves, I will soon surpass the Earl. Thinking of the exciting scene at that time, he couldn't help but let out a laugh. Hee. On the way back, he once again called out the smoke mission. "Mission, you have studied the blue iron, plastic aluminum, and the unintelligible books left behind by the sky ship as well as the magic seeds. Why not continue to study the pile of strange wood? Perhaps they can bring you new inspiration. Reward, an astonishingly talented follower." The strange wood mentioned in the quest description was actually the pieces of wood that were salvaged from the sky ship. The wood seemed to have sprouted and was very hard, not inferior to the thorn's ironwood. However, List had studied it for a few days before and did not find much information. He even planned to use it to build the castle if he had no clue. Its similar branches had already been used to build the sky ship. Now it seemed that these strange woods were hiding a secret. However, what does an astonishingly talented follower mean? You want me to recruit a new follower? Should I look for one among the new serfs? What kind of talent is that? Is it even more amazing than my talent? List was a little confused. Of course, he wanted to have a powerful follower, but the title of astonishingly talented was something he wanted to wear on his head. First complete the mission, then slowly pay attention to this follower. Back in the castle, he immediately began to study the strange wood, which was obviously a building material. The most peculiar thing about it was the shape of a naturally grown keel in the sky ship, which showed that this wood was very malleable. However, List felt that it was shaped by a kind of magic. According to the clues at hand, it could be judged that the children of the sun lived in the forest and were companions with trees. Moreover, they had very high magic attainments. Not only could they turn into bears, eagles, leopards, but they could also turn into trees. It could be seen that it was not unusual for them to master magic to make trees grow in a fixed manner. This kind of magic was even recorded in the Sun Scrolls. However, List's vocabulary was too little to understand the contents of the book. I guess that among the potion seeds I harvested, there were seeds that grew into this kind of tree. But what does the smoke mission mean by asking me to study the wood again? What secrets are waiting to be unearthed in the wood? In the castle, he soaked it in water, burned it with fire, and chopped it with a knife. Apart from proving that it reached ironwood quality, he did not find much useful information. Shaking his head, he temporarily put aside his study of the wood. Walking into the glass greenhouse, he patiently tended to the potion seeds that were germinating one after another. 1/3 of these seeds had germinated. The broad bean seed that germinated first had grown into a small seedling, and the tender leaves looked no different from an ordinary plant seedling. Just as he was loosening the soil, a seed was accidentally dug out. He was just about to bury it again when he suddenly found that the seed had germinated, but the germination had died at some point. The seed is dead? He was surprised for a moment, thought of something, and quickly dug up another place where there was a seed but it had not germinated. A seed was dug out and like the previous seed, it germinated but died. Several seeds were dug out in a row, and except for one that had not yet germinated, the others had germinated but died. Why would germinate and still die? Is it because it has been stored for too long and there is not enough vitality? Because the dead seeds involved many species, and there were corresponding species that thrived, it could be ruled out as an environmental problem. He thought carefully and felt that it might be that the seeds were too old, resulting in insufficient vitality. Although it was a pity that nearly 2/3 of the seeds had died, 1/3 had germinated, which more or less lessened the regret in his heart. Just then an idea flashed in his mind. He connected the seed and the wood together. The seed germinated but died. The wood I fished out also sprouted once, but the tender bud died very quickly. Does this mean that these pieces of wood that were sawed into pieces were the seeds used to cultivate plants? Not all plants relied on seeds to germinate, and there were many plants that could germinate directly from the trunk. So, Chapter 5:10. It was already February. The sky was still snowing intermittently. The serfs of Black Horse Island and Flower Town were still working in the heavy snow. Liszt, who was studying wood, received a message from the Knight of Tulip Castle inviting him to a banquet. The theme of the banquet was to celebrate his brother Lytton's breakthrough to the Earth Knight. A 14-year-old Earth Knight. It seems that Lytton's birthday is in November. That is to say, he is actually only 13 years old and a few months old. Liszt asked the butler to entertain the messenger knight and did not accept the invitation. This talent is really good, better than Levis. He was not interested in Lytton's future. He asked the butler to prepare a congratulatory gift and continued his research work. With his current identity, he did not care what others thought. If he did not want to attend the banquet, even the Earl could not force him. No one in the Tulip family would and dared not blame him. Strength was the source of confidence. It seems that in another month I will be 18 years old, and the 5 power-charged moves of the Burning Red Sun Rising Fire are about to be mastered. After I master them, I will challenge the Count and see how big the gap between me and the Sword Saint is. He was confident that he could rely on the powerful attributes of the Dragon Chi to fight the Earl alone. But before the fight started, it was difficult to predict the outcome of the battle. There were many factors that affected the battle between the Sky Knight, not just the battle of Chi. Wow! Chirp. Suddenly the Thorn Sprite, Ella, chased the Corn Sprite Mickey and flew out of the castle. Mickey flew directly to Liszt, seeking shelter, and Ella was not willing to let him go. However, after seeing Liszt, it turned and flew out of the castle, to the Garden of Thorns to vent its anger. The conditioned reflex had been formed. As long as it was angry, it would run to the Garden of Thorns to plant thorns. The first Thorn Sprite may not have much to do with Ella, but the second Thorn Sprite was definitely affected by Ella's constant magic. Liszt was happy to see this result. Jigu jigu jigu. After Ella left, Mickey became active, flying in the glass greenhouse and touching the newly germinated potion seeds with her small hands from time to time. Liszt was afraid that it would accidentally hurt the tender seedlings, so he waved his hand. Mickey, go play outside. Chirp. Mickey was very obedient and immediately flew outside. Not long after, his valet Thomas walked over. Master, Administrative Officer Isaiah requests to see you. Let him come here. Isaiah waited under the castle's apple tree under the caterpillar fungus. After a few steps, he arrived at the glass greenhouse. Sir, Isaiah would like to report to you the fiscal revenue of Flower Town for January. Go ahead. Our main income in January is glass sales. The nobles of Coral Island have shown great enthusiasm for glass. The glass cups blown by the glass workshop and pressed window glass are the most popular products. In just half a month, the sales profit has exceeded the revenue of flower wine. Is glass so popular? Liszt doesn't worry much about government affairs, but he has asked about the profitable business. He remembered that the output of glass was still not high. He did not expect the profit to surpass that of liquor. Glass is very popular, but glass is not a consumable such as liquor. With the aristocracy buying glass products in large quantities, the Coral Island market will soon be saturated. The Tulip family's caravan is ready to sell to the outer islands. This is our exclusive product, there is no competition, and it can be spread throughout the country. It can also be sold to the mainland. The future development of glass will definitely surpass liquor. Liszt was well aware of the potential of glass. What restricts us now is the output of the glass workshop and the protection of the glass-making process. Subsequently, Isaiah introduced other financial revenues. Overall, the territory's finances in January have turned losses into profits, and Flower Town alone earned more than 300 gold coins. With the recovery of the liquor revenue, the income of the territory next month will increase greatly, and Liszt will not need to desperately subsidize it. So far, most of the funds for the construction of the territory have come from his private pocket. Of course, the territory is privately owned by him. He hopes to separate his private income from the territory's income, but it is unlikely to be so clear. After all, products such as potions, World of Warcraft, and pearls can be regarded as his private property, or as the territory's specialties. Only things like shipwrecks and treasures can be regarded as his private income in a strict sense, and can be included in his small treasury. With his purse bulging, Liszt's confidence returned. If there are not enough potions, he will buy them. If there are not enough World of Warcraft meat, he will buy them. If there are not enough surf food, he will buy them. If there are not enough construction materials, he will buy them. He even wrote to Tulip Castle and Longtaro Castle, asking them to pay attention to the Black Nightshade Worm and Thorns Worm. Once someone sells them, he is willing to buy them at a high price. In the hands of others, the Black Nightshade Worm and Thorns Worm are not very useful. In his hands they are priceless treasures. In addition, barley worm, wheat worm, corn worm, as long as there is something to buy, he wants to buy them. The territory's food production is too low, and there is still a long way to go before it is self-sufficient, which makes List feel insecure. He hopes that the territory will not only rely on various specialties to make a lot of money, but also achieve food self-sufficiency. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. The wood that List was looking forward to finally germinated, confirming his conjecture about wood breeding. Sure enough, this batch of wood is the seed. Although I do not know how to guide them to grow into the shape of a keel, but I can explore first and one day I will figure it out. Let's call them ship planting wood. Ship planting wood can be used to grow ships. With the discovery of the secret, the smoke mission was also completed. Mission completed, reward Emily's chi sublimation. List's eyes widened. Emily's chi sublimation, what does that mean? I remember I also received a chi sublimation reward, that time I broke through from trainee knight to earth knight. Does it mean that Emily has also promoted to an earth knight? At the very most, Emily had only been cultivating chi for a year. Even with List providing her with World of Warcraft meat and dragon milk, breaking through from 0 to earth knight in a year is still an inconceivable thing. List exhaled, calming down. No wonder the smoke mission called her a follower with astonishing talent. This talent completely surpasses Lytton. Lytton is currently the first Tulip family genius to break through to Earth Knight. But he has been training for at least 5 to 6 years before becoming an Earth Knight at the age of 13. Emily started training at the age of 11, and now at the age of 12 she has already become an Earth Knight. Comparing the two, one can see how terrifying Emily's talent is. So terrifying that it makes List jealous. In fact, he has long discovered that Emily's chi cultivation is very easy. Half a year ago she was already full of low-level chi and could break through at any time. However, he still found it hard to accept that she had really broken through. That shouldn't be the case. She's just a commoner. Based on my research of this world, the cultivation of battle aura is directly related to nutrition. Furthermore, it is a decisive factor. And the so-called talent is also because aristocratic bloodlines are more likely to give birth to talented children. He once summed it up. The theory of becoming stronger in this world. Aristocrats rely on drugs, commoners rely on mutation. Although there are talented commoners who struggle for a few generations to rise to the ranks of aristocrats, a mutation like Emily is unheard of. Her background is very clear. In the Eagle Kingdom, her parents are ordinary serfs. She is not an aristocrat, and has not been through generations of continuous genetic improvement. This kind of mutation is really scary. If commoners can mutate like this, the foundation of aristocratic rule should have been broken long ago. But then again, if she didn't meet me, Emily would probably just be a farming serf for the rest of her life, right? No matter how good her talent is, it will be buried if there is no opportunity to uncover it. He simply stopped thinking about Emily's talent, and went straight to Emily to see what was going on. Chapter 5:11. Emily was still practicing in Flower Town, and Maggie, who was with her, had gone to Black Horse Island. The reason why she stayed here was that the night instructor had nothing to teach her, so he let her practice alone. She was cultivating on the grassland of the castle. She would come to the castle to eat every day. In fact, List was very good to this follower of the smoke mission. Not only did he provide her with World of Warcraft meat and dragon milk every day, but he also gave her the first mixed dragon colt born from Fire Dragon and Black Dragon, Sala. He had high expectations of her and would take the time to give her pointers when he had time. Although it was said that they were lord and follower, in fact, List played the overlapping roles of teacher, father, and lord. When he walked out of the castle and came to the meadow, he saw Emily riding Sala in the distance, sprinting and practicing Knight's Charge. She was very engrossed, shouting slogans in a childish voice while charging. List was not in a hurry to disturb her. He simply returned to the apple tree and sat in the rocking chair, waiting for her to finish her practice. The servant brought milk, tea and pastries, and he took out the fire dragon Ken, ready to take out the fire dragon magic to feed the mini fire dragon. This guy eats and sleeps, and every time he wakes up, it will shout, oh roar for food. By the way, he looked at the new smoke mission. Mission. The popularity of glass has made you realize that technology is the primary productive force, and the monopoly of technology is an important means of ensuring the territory's wealth. Security for important crafts needs to be put on the agenda. Please form a security team. Reward, a magic book. Form a security team and reward me with a magic book. The mission was not difficult and the reward was not new. A security team must be formed, but how to form it needed to be carefully considered. At present, the defense forces on the territory were mainly composed of three parts: the regular orders of chivalry composed of Earth Knight, the patrol orders of chivalry upgraded from patrols, and the insect protection teams of the various towns. There was no need to move the regular orders of chivalry. This was the foundation of the knight system and its existence was reasonable. The patrol orders of chivalry were similar to the functions of armed police and public security. The insect protection teams were similar to the functions of militia and security organizations. These two could be reformed. Also, the territory needs to add another group of rats. List narrowed his eyes. It was impossible for all nobles to be righteous existences. There must be some shady dealings. Of course, List wouldn't take the initiative to play dirty tricks, but he had to be on guard against others using dirty tricks to deal with him. When the flower town was still very weak, rats arranged by other aristocrats had mixed in. Even the rats of Tulip Castle had been present. Rats had always acted as the eyes and ears of the aristocrats. At the beginning, Black Horse Island was also discovered by the rats of Tulip Castle first, but the ship was wrecked, so List took advantage of it. He comforted the little fire dragon that was crying piteously for food. He took out a thick bast paper and a quill and began to write and draw. Outline the new organization. The regular orders of chivalry will not be changed, the patrol orders of chivalry will be renamed the patrol group, and the insect protection team will be removed from the militia attribute. At first, the territory lacked people, so serfs were used as the insect protection team. Now that the territory does not lack trainee knight, it is entirely possible to form a professional insect protection team. It is best to integrate the insect protection team with the security team to form a security group. In this way, the armed forces of the territory were formed into three parts: the orders of chivalry, the patrol group, and the security group. These were the armed forces on the surface. In private, he would also recruit and train rats to form a ranger group. The ranger group would focus on intelligence work. In addition to collecting information inside and outside the territory, they would also have to fight against espionage. The orders of chivalry will be temporarily handed over to Marcus to manage. After a few years, Amelie should be able to grow up and take over. List looked up into the distance. Amelie was still practicing. The patrol group was handed over to Paris to manage. The security group needed to be carefully chosen. His former retainer knight Karl Hammerstein was too weak and incompetent. He was inclined to the elite Earth Knight Charles Trapp. Charles was not young anymore. After a few more orders of expansion, he would be conferred the title of Lord Knight. He should also withdraw from the front line of fighting. He was suitable to manage the security group. As for the ranger group, there were no suitable candidates, but there was no hurry for the time being. It would take time to select suitable personnel to train into rats. He put away the thick bast paper and began to write a letter. After a letter was written, he said to his valet Thomas, "Call Xavier." "Yes, master." The retainer knight Xavier quickly ran over. "Sir." List looked at Xavier carefully. The former thin boy had become strong. "I have just written an appointment here. You take a boat to Black Horse Island and give it to Advisor Gort. Let him issue the appointment on your behalf." "As you wish." If he let the retainer knight deliver the letter, he would not go to Black Horse Island himself. Now there was no castle on Black Horse Island. Every time he went there, he had to live in a wooden house. The food cooked by the chef over there was not to List's taste. He preferred to eat the food made by Mrs. Abbey. Mrs. Abbey understood him. List looked at Xavier's back as he left. List thoughtfully said, "Xavier was a little old when he practiced Qi. He did not have enough potential. It may be a bit difficult for him to become an Earth Knight. However, he is very clever. Among my retainer knight, he is the most clever. Perhaps I can let him try to manage the ranger group?" The thought just flashed lightly. He did not continue. The formation of the ranger group was not urgent. At this time, Emily, who was practicing, had already found List. According to the original rhythm, she would continue to practice and did not need to come to see him. But this time, Emily dashed over. In the winter she was only wearing thin clothes, sweating profusely and panting. There was excitement in her eyes that could not be hidden. She tried to restrain her breath and respectfully saluted, "Sir." List smiled slightly. "What's the matter?" The 12-year-old girl in front of him had tan skin, but her spirit was very vigorous. Her height was becoming more and more outstanding, already more than 1.6 meters tall. Her originally thin and weak body had also begun to develop secondary sexual characteristics. Her chest gradually bulged and her buttocks had a clear curve change. She had a tanned face, deep eye sockets and a high nose bridge. She was a beauty with a bit of exotic charm. She restrained her excitement and made herself look more mature and steady. "Sir, Emily has broken through. Just now, Emily has become an Earth Knight." Although her tone was not loud, the trembling of her excited voice deeply betrayed her mood. "Is that so?" List immediately released magic eyes. Sure enough, the color of Emily's magic power was no longer colorless, but purple-white. This was thunder-attributed chi. Thunder-attributed chi was outstanding in the aspect of explosive power. More importantly, List had a high-level thunder-attributed chi secret manual, 15-kilogram Thunder Skyshock Flash, that he had collected from Count Snade of Fragrant Celery Castle. As for ordinary thunder-attributed chi secret manuals, there was no shortage of them on the Coral Island. Emily's cultivation path was destined to be smooth. As for whether she could become a Sky Knight with her talent and List's nurturing, it was almost a done deal. Restraining the trace of jealousy in his heart, List said with a smile, "Congratulations, Emily, you have become a thunder-attributed Earth Knight." Chapter 512. A year of hard work to become an Earth Knight. Emily's talent was beyond doubt, even the Smoke Mission was amazed. List already had a plan for her training. He was going to train Emily as a future Sky Knight. She had the talent to become a Sky Knight at the right age. There were no female Dragon Knight in this world, but there were still many female Sky Knights. It was just that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had not appeared yet. Women were naturally weak in the training system, and most noble women had to bear the task of childbirth, which delayed their training. As a tool for marriage, the family's training efforts were not great. As noble as the two daughters of Sapphire Grand Duke, they also did not receive many training resources. It was also possible that they did not think about training at all. After all, training was not a simple thing, it required a lot of suffering. How could it be as easy as being a noble lady, dancing and talking about love? "Emily, I am very pleased that you were able to become an Earth Knight in a year. My lord, I still need to work harder." "Hard work is necessary. You are a commoner and a woman at that. Only hard work can make you reach higher heights. You are a follower that I admire. You have a strong talent, and I can accumulate resources to train you. But if you do not have the desire to become stronger, no one can guarantee your future." Emily replied seriously, "Please rest assured, my lord, I will redouble my efforts and will not let you down. Rest well for the next 2 days and stabilize your mid-level chi. I will choose a suitable lightning chi secret manual for you, and at the same time increase your nutrition standards." "Thank you, my lord." The 12-year-old girl quickly left the apple tree. Looking at her slim back, List could not help but feel emotional. The strength of the territory is constantly growing. I am improving, the others are also improving. Achi and Chris have both become great wizards, and Emily has also become an Earth Knight. A Viscount's territory gave birth to 2 great wizards and a Sky Knight. Such strength was unprecedented. A moment later, after feeding the mini Charmander, List looked at the empty Charmander jar and began to feel sad again. Now there are still parts of Black Horse Island where volcanic glass has not yet been mined. At most, 3 more Fire Dragon jars of magic will be produced before it is completely exhausted. If the mini Fire Dragon wants to continue to devour Fire Dragon magic at that time, it will have no choice but to take out the Fire Dragon magic of the Fire Dragon Brick Factory and the Glass Workshop. However, he could not bear to let the Fire Dragon Brick Factory and the Glass Workshop stop working for the time being, even though he had already ordered the workers to experiment with the charcoal furnace, in preparation for emptying the magic of the Fire Dragon in the future. After all, in order to ride a dragon, List would throw himself into it at all costs. Then again, once the Fire Dragon was born, the magic of the Fire Dragon would not be less. 1 day later, when Gort received the letter and announced List's appointment of Charles Pitfall as the head of the security group, the Smoke Mission was completed. Mission completed. Reward, Aries Truth's Herbal Classification. In the afternoon, Elksun Truth returned with the latest batch of magic books, as well as 3 simple ordinary magic that he had painstakingly found. After getting the reward he wanted, he left Flower Town in a hurry, ready to go to the brothel in Coral City to have a good time. So List easily found this Aries Truth's herbal classification from a pile of magic books. A professional book about herbal medicine? List flipped open the book, and his interest was immediately piqued when he saw the contents. This magician named Aries Truth doesn't study magic power. Instead, he studies herbs that can cure illnesses and save lives. It seems that he is a scholar like Li Shizhen. Li Shizhen edited the Chinese medicine masterpiece, Compendium of Materia Medica, and could be called a medicine saint. The herbal classification, edited by Aries Truth, although also very rich in content, is obviously not comparable to the Compendium of Materia Medica. From the records on the catalog page, there are about 120 herbs recorded with illustrations. Compared to the thousands of medicines in the Compendium of Materia Medica, it seems very shabby. In this world, this is already a great progress. After all, in a society supported by magic, the knight and magician have no motivation to study medicine. The knight and magician's body is constantly improving with magic, and it is difficult for them to get sick. As for those civilians, the noble knight and magician do not care about their lives at all. Only Liszt, as the soul of modern people, is more concerned about the life and death of the civilians. Then he accidentally encountered a magician who also cared about the civilians and wrote this medical magic book. He called another retainer knight, Philip. You take this magic book to advisor Gort, let him find someone to make a few copies, and arrange for this book to be placed in the Knight Academy of Craftsmen as one of the teaching textbooks. Yes, my lord. Philip took the order and left. Of course, the cover of the magic book he took with him had been scratched. Next, Liszt hid in the study again and scratched the covers of all the remaining magic books one by one, looking for possible secret techniques of qi. After confirming that all the magic books did not contain any hidden secret techniques of qi, he then dully threw himself into the new smoke mission. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. The smoke mission is really a projection of my inner world. The scene that I imagined a few days ago really appeared in the form of a mission. He looked at the ever-changing smoke serpentines with an embarrassed expression. Mission: Lee William is a mountain in your heart waiting to be surpassed. Although you are still young, your strength is no longer inferior. Work hard to cultivate the burning red sun rising fire, and defeat Lee William. You will see the wonderful expression on his face. Reward: old friends hovering. Although it was embarrassing, the mission's content coincided with his thoughts. In the Coral Island, the only one who could be his opponent and accept the challenge was the Count. Currently, the burning red sun rising fire had 5 power-charged moves: full red sun, rising sun, scorching sun, setting sun, and burning red clouds. He had yet to learn burning red clouds. The challenge could be issued at any time. But what is the meaning of this old friend's hovering? Liszt was puzzled no matter how much he thought about it. He, who had transmigrated, had not made any friends in the past 2 years, and was only constantly accepting followers. However, he did have some friends in his previous life. Most of these friends had come to Black Horse Island to settle down and become his followers. The only few who did not come were not old friends. Liszt did not regard them as friends at all. I don't have any old friends. If we're talking about old lovers, perhaps Duniko Hyacinth counts as one. However, I heard that she's already married and is now the wife of a count's son. Even though Ranesa Golden Wheats isn't married yet, her naive love has long since dissipated. He did not think that these 2 women would have any entanglement with him again. Similarly, he could not think of any old friends. Forget it, I won't think about it. When I challenge the Count and defeat him, I will naturally know who my old friend is. He suddenly pulled out the sky cutter sword, his heart burning. Practice, become stronger. I want to become the strongest on Coral Island. The waves behind push the waves before, and the waves before die on the beach. Now. Chapter 513. Spin, jump, I fly to the sky. The training of a sky knight was completely different from that of an earth knight. An earth knight couldn't live without the earth, while a sky knight yearned for the sky. With the continuous training of burning red sun rising fire, he could already control the way to fly up to 100 meters in the air and use powerful battle energy moves in the air. With the help of diving, falling, and other powerful forces, he could attack the enemy on the ground. One person was enough to crush in orders of chivalry. At the same time, Liszt didn't forget about multiple arrows. Using high-level battle energy to perform archery, the power was even more terrifying. His control was also greatly enhanced. Originally, with his mid-level battle energy, he could only control the triple arrow realm. Now he could control the multiple arrow realm. He could pull 4 arrows with one hand and randomly combine the flight path of the arrows. He could still hit where he pointed without missing. Ultimate profoundness, multiple phantom arrow, he could shoot instantly without needing a long time to accumulate power. And one day, Liszt gradually discovered that because his high-level battle energy had been upgraded to high-level fire attribute dragon battle energy, the power was greatly increased, but the speed of dissipation was greatly reduced. From the moment the arrow started to hit the target, the battle energy attached to the arrow would still not completely dissipate. This allowed him to control the arrow from start to finish, and the threat was greatly enhanced. He could also ignite the battle energy at the last moment, and the power was increased by another level. The power of an ordinary Sky Knight's arrow is 1 point. With the bonus of dragon battle energy, I'm at least 3 points. Although he hadn't seen other Sky Knights shoot arrows with his level of control, the analysis of combat power had reached a very subtle level, and there wouldn't be too much error. Bang bang. He fell from the sky, and the battle energy accumulated in his feet bounced back from the ground, and he steadily controlled his body. And he didn't step on the ground just like a normal person jumping off the wall. He put away the swift shadow bow. Pulling out the sky cutter sword, he quickly performed the 12 ordinary moves of burning red sun rising fire. Ordinary moves did not have a fixed routine and could be combined randomly. This kind of move was more like a kind of guidance for Do Chi, not a forceful combination of some kind of powerful move. This secret manual is somewhat inconsistent with the nature of the Do Chi in my body, especially now that I already possess the Dragon Do Chi. It is no longer a pure fire Do Chi. While practicing his moves, he could also be distracted. When I have time, I must fix this high-level Chi secret book, and even compile a new high-level Chi secret book that suits me. When he was chatting with the Earl before, he had said that he would write his own high-level Chi secret book. At that time he was suspected of bragging and had not taken any action since then. But now he really felt that other people's Do Chi secret manuals were not perfectly compatible with his own Do Chi, and he was unable to perfectly display his fighting strength. However, he was unable to compile a new secret manual in such a short period of time. He could only continue to practice Red Sun Rising Fire for the time being. Black Horse Island, the heavy snow had stopped. The sun split the dark clouds, and the sound of melting snow could be heard from every corner of the island. Thorntown's Thorn Garden, Liszt stood in the middle of a patch of thorns, took out a jade box, and let the newly contracted thorn worm crawl onto his hand. He called out softly, "Little fellow, release the worm's stalk." The thorny thorn worm opened its mouth and spat out a ray of light, which turned into a seed and landed in the center of the thorny garden. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, a brand new thorn quickly grew out. This was a thorn worm born from fast-growing magic thorns. Compared to the grayish-white ordinary thorn worm, its color was white with a touch of purple. Prettier. However, as long as it is a thorn sprout worm, the plants it affects are all thorns. Based on Liszt's knowledge and observation of sprite worms, the scope of influence of sprite worms was bounded by plant genera, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, race, genus, species. Species is the most basic classification of species. A genus is a collection of closely related species. Alfalfa was a genus. Below it were alfalfa, sky blue alfalfa, and woody alfalfa, which was a shrub. The alfalfa worms had an influence on the alfalfa of these species. But beyond the genus, sprite worms could no longer influence them. For example, barley and wheat were both members of the Triticii, but they were of different genera. Therefore, barley sprout worms could not influence wheat, and wheat sprout worms could not influence barley. Once a plant of the same species mutated to produce a magic ingredient, it was equivalent to the emergence of a new species. Fast-growing magic thorns were a new species, but they still belonged to the thorns genus. They were closely related to ordinary thorns, fast-growing magic thorns, fast-growing poisonous thorns, fast-growing thorny thorns, and fast-growing iron thorns, and were all affected by the thorn sprout worm. Similarly, corn grass also mutated into corn, oil corn, and cob corn, all of which belonged to the corn genus. On Earth they probably belonged to the corn genus. But here they belonged to the corn genus defined by Liszt. The worm stalk was settled. The thorn sprout worm was clearly a lot weaker. Liszt put it back into the jade box and told Charles, the head of the security group who followed him, "The security team must take good care of the cordyceps in the Garden of Thorns. When spring comes, I may move Ella's cordyceps over. The Garden of Thorns will be the focus of the territory's planting area." "I understand. Sir, please rest assured that the security corps will guard all the worm stalks and workshops." Charles was complacent. He used to be a wandering Lord Knight, but he gave up his title and followed List back to the battlefield. The changes in the territory and the power of the Lord made him extremely grateful for his original decision. What's more, he was put in an important position and became one of the 3 heads of the security corps. He knew that he could not compare to Marcus in terms of connections, nor could he compare to Paris in terms of strength and beauty. It was already a great honor for him to be the head of the security corps. Only by working hard could he repay the Lord's appreciation. He gave Charles a few words of encouragement. List left the Garden of Thorns and rushed all the way to Newport town. Now that the new port was almost completed, ships could be berthed. On one side of the new port, a simple dock had been built. The sunken sky ship was being modified into a seagoing ship in the dock. There were no professional shipbuilders in the territory, so the shipbuilders could only imitate other sailboats to design the sky ship. "Sir, you are welcome to inspect the progress of the dock." The manager in charge of the dock was an Earth Knight recruited from the Eagle Kingdom. He was very interested in shipbuilding. "How is the progress of the Sunset?" asked List. The Sunset was the name of the new ship. At present, there were a total of 7 ships launched in the Flower Town. They were the Flower, the Thorns, the Mangrove, the Pearl, as well as the 3 newly launched ships, the Corn, the Rubber, and the Snake Blood. The names were in honor of the Corn Sprite Mickey, the Rubber Worm Triplets, and the mid-level sea monster, the 6-headed king sea snake. At present, the repair work on the Sunset's main body is nearly complete. We are thinking about how to modify it. Its hull is too large and the design is very complicated, requiring at least 3 sails to provide power. Our shipbuilders only have some experience with 2-masted sailboats, so it is very difficult to design a 3-masted sailboat. Then organize a group of shipbuilders to inspect the Tulip family's 3-masted sailboat and figure out its structure. I will arrange it. Thank you, sir. After inspecting the dock, List no longer hesitated and returned to the Flower Town to rest for the night. The next day, February 17th. He put on the mithril armor that he had not worn for a long time, lined with snakeskin armor and covered with a red, black, and gold-edged cloak. He carried the swift shadow bow on his back and the sky cutter greatsword on his waist. He then put on the sapphire pendant, amplification bracelet, and stabilization ring. Riding the chocobo Loki, he called out to the Blizzard Beast squad. Following behind him were the retainer knight and the accompanying valet. Treading on the snow that had not melted, he headed towards the Tulip Castle. The 5 power-charged moves of the rising red sun flame have been successfully practiced, and the high-level fire attribute Dragon Chi is also abundant. Chapter 5:14. I thought you were so busy on Black Horse Island that you didn't even have time to attend the banquet to celebrate Litton's promotion. In the study, the Count was quite surprised by List's visit. At the same time, he expressed his dissatisfaction that List did not come to the banquet to celebrate Litton's promotion to Earth Knight. Of course, it was just dissatisfaction. List smiled. I've been really busy during this time. The development of Black Horse Island is inseparable from me, but now that it's on track, I have more free time. I wanted to come to Tulip Castle to enjoy lunch, and at the same time, I would like to ask Father for advice on cultivation. Ask me. The Count's heart suddenly thumped, and a bad picture emerged in his mind. You have always been very assertive on the path of cultivation. Do you really need me to give you any advice? Yes, you are a Sky Knight at the Sword Saint level and I am just an ordinary Sky Knight. With your guidance, I can avoid some detours and find the most correct path to practice. It's right for you to have such a cautious idea. I have always believed in the truth that I can see further by standing on the shoulders of giants. Well, it's a very interesting sentence. On the road of Chi cultivation, the wisdom of our predecessors is undoubtedly as huge as a giant. We practice the Chi secrets left by our predecessors and continue the Chi levels that our predecessors have walked. If we can't conquer this giant and climb on the shoulders of giants, then it's a failure. The Count frowned and a bad feeling came to his heart again. This guy clearly came to ask me for advice. Why is he talking about these principles? List also quickly realized that today was not a chat. He decisively went straight to the point. Father, you are as tall as a giant to me, and you are also the object that I hope to surpass. And today I have a little success in practicing the red sun rising fire, so I want to ask Father for advice on actual combat. Ask for advice on actual combat? The Count was stunned, then nodded with a very complicated expression. I thought you really wanted to ask me for advice, but you just wanted to challenge me. When you were an elite Earth Knight, you challenged me once. It seems that after being promoted to a Sky Knight, your mentality has inflated. List's expression was calm. I am not inflated, I am just eager to know my true strength. Very well, I also want to see clearly how much strength my most outstanding son has that I don't know. The Earl suddenly got up and left the desk. You go to the manor and wait for me. I'm going to change my equipment. Yes, father. List turned and left and went to the manor to wait patiently. Back in the castle, William summoned his valet and said, Bring me my battle gear. I want to change. When the servant came back with a lot of equipment, Madame Marie also came over. My dear, are you going out today? You even took out your armor? Sword fight. Madame Marie was surprised. His purpose today is to ask you for advice? Sword fight? Madame Marie was surprised. The purpose of his visit today is to ask you for advice on a sword fight. Yes. Madame Marie didn't know much about sword fights between Sky Knights. She was a typical noble lady of a manor, good at socializing and housekeeping, but she didn't know anything about cultivation. Let Lytton watch from the side. He is already an Earth Knight. Watching a powerful knight fight will certainly help his cultivation. A fight between a Sky Knight doesn't give much inspiration to an Earth Knight. Madam, what Lytton needs is a solid foundation, not combat experience. Even if Levis didn't go to Golden Island with Rolia and stood here, I still wouldn't let him watch the fight. An Earth Knight and a Sky Knight are two different realms. Alright, I am too worried. I just hope that Lytton can quickly grow up. My dear, you know that his talent isn't any worse than anyone else's. I understand, don't worry. The Earl comforted Madame Marie and continued to change his equipment. Madame Marie helped him tidy up his armor and accompanied him out of the castle. At this time, List was already riding on the chocobo Loki's back. When he saw William leave, he quickly said, Father, the rocky beach to the north is quiet and uninhabited. It's more suitable for combat. I'll go first. With that said, he rode Loki away and disappeared into the horizon in just a few blinks of an eye. Madame Marie looked at the direction where List disappeared and sighed, Is there really a son of glory in this world? A bloodline fruit created Dosin, and another bloodline fruit created Loki. His luck is unbelievable. For so many years you have been looking for an intermediate World of Warcraft, but you never found one. The Earl didn't want to answer. He just let his squire bring his mount, a horse that had the bloodline of a World of Warcraft's drywood leopard. He mounted the horse and chased after List. Rocky Beach. With his hands behind his back, List looked at the surging waves on the beach and quietly adjusted his body's condition. Next would be his first sword fight since becoming a Sky Knight, and also the highest quality battle. Da-da-da-da-da. The Earl quickly arrived. No squires, no servants, no onlookers. On Rocky Beach there were only two Sky Knights on Coral Island looking at each other. Father, List challenges you. He slowly pulled out the Sky Cutter greatsword, his chi surging. The Earl didn't waste any time and pulled out his long sword, two glistening yellow and green gems. Begin! This sword was called Tenacious Sword, derived from the two yellow gems with tenacity and the emerald with endurance attribute. Before his voice fell. Boom! With a whistling sound, List had already operated his chi, turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the Earl. The basic move of Red Sun Rising Fire also had amazing attack power. In an instant, the Sky Cutter greatsword arrived in front of the Earl. The Earl's eyes flickered slightly. He raised the tenacious sword and accurately hit the Sky Cutter greatsword. Two chi bloomed on the blades of both sides, one red and one blue, reflecting each other. Before the chi could distinguish which was stronger, the blades separated from each other, and the two wielding the swords each took a step back. Then List once again slashed with his sword, and the Earl also brandished his sword to meet the attack. Clang! Clang! The fiery red fire chi and the bluish-white water chi, accompanied by the constant probing attacks, gradually twisted together and consumed each other. List was still probing and attacking. His fighting style could be described as violent, unforgiving when he gained the upper hand. After discovering that the Earl's resistance was not as strong as he had imagined, he could not bear it anymore and increased the output of chi, ready to switch from probing attacks to crazy attacks. The Earl, on the other hand, frowned in the midst of his probing attacks. He had gone on countless expeditions and had also fought countless sword fights with strong and weak opponents. Some opponents were good at entanglement, while others focused on eruption. However, in front of his water chi, their chi was far less durable and violent than List's fire chi. What was more frightening was that for every trace of chi of List, he needed to release even more chi to eliminate it. Chapter 5:15. The Count was horrified. List felt good. He went all out, giving the Count almost no time to react. High-level fire attribute Dragon Battle Chi was attached to the Sky Cutter Greatsword, wantonly crisscrossing. Relying on the slow dissipation of the Battle Chi, almost all the dozens of meters around the body were filled with Battle Chi. Red Sun Full Wheel. With a loud roar in his heart, the Sky Cutter Greatsword danced like a red sun. The dense Battle Chi continued to squeeze, igniting all the surrounding fire attribute Battle Chi in the next 1/10 of a second. Like an explosion, a large sea of fire was instantly ignited, crushing toward the Count. The blue and white water attribute Battle Chi was squeezed less than a few meters in front of the Count. In the face of such a burning flame, his Battle Chi simply could not trigger a qualitative change, turning into seawater. It could only continue to evaporate in the flame. If he wanted to replenish it, he had to face List's non-stop attack. He was suppressed to the point where he could only passively defend. He wanted to fight back, but he could not break through the pervasive flame. This caused the rage in his heart to accumulate even more. He felt as if he wasn't receiving List's guidance at all, and he was being suppressed by List instead. He felt as if he was locked in a steamer, and he was in an extremely sorry state. However, after all, he had experienced countless sword battles. He was not in a sorry state. His Battle Chi consumption couldn't keep up, so he focused on defense and patiently looked for opportunities. Finally, in the midst of List's overwhelming attack, he found a flaw and immediately broke out with a big attack. The water attribute Battle Chi accompanied the enduring sword, deflecting the attack of the Sky Cutter Greatsword. Then his Battle Chi gushed out, and his body flew hundreds of meters into the air. Leaving the flame area, it was really like a bird flying in the open sea and sky. The whistling cold wind blew on his face, making his red face that was almost steamed by the flame quickly cool down. The comfortable feeling stimulated him to roar, "List, my son Sky Knight, the real battle has just begun." But before he could get into position, he saw 4 fiery red arrow trajectories coming straight at him. One at the front, one at the back, one on the left, one on the right, sealing off the space for him to maneuver and dodge. After all, he was high up in the sky and had nowhere to borrow strength from, making it difficult for him to dodge the arrows. Archery doesn't have much lethality against the Sky Knight. The Count was not in a hurry. He drew a circle with the enduring sword, ready to block. However, the next moment, when the enduring sword touched the arrow suddenly exploded. The power wasn't that great, but it was quite unexpected. He had never seen an arrow fired from such a long distance, and it even had Do Chi attached. Therefore, the Count was careless and was hit by the explosion of the fire-attributed Chi at close range. The chaotic impact of the Chi wave almost knocked him down from the air. Even though he managed to stabilize himself in time, a strand of brownish-yellow hair on his forehead was still burnt by the flames. "My hair." The Count's face, which had just cooled down, turned red again at a speed visible to the naked eye. Unfortunately, before he could get angry, List, who had quickly put away his swift shadow bow, leaped into the air with his Do Chi gushing out. He turned into a red rocket and went straight to him. He waved the Sky Cutter sword in the air and suddenly bombarded the Count with the move Rising Sun. In the next second, the Count screamed and flew toward the distant sea in a free-fall trajectory. List adjusted his figure and followed the Count, not ready to give the Count any chance to fight back. He had entered the state of the sword battle and was fully immersed in the battle. It was clear that the opponent was a powerful sword saint, and only by going all out could he defeat the opponent. Even if it was an actual combat exercise between father and son, he shouldn't go easy in a sword battle. The strong always go all out in a battle. Falling Sun. The Rising Sun burning fire was released again, and List, who caught up with the Count, made another fierce move. Even though the Count had adjusted his posture while flying and met the attack with his strongest combat power, he was still bombarded by this move. The explosive fire-attributed Chi was not something that his water-attributed Chi could resist at all. There was a fundamental gap between them. Why is this happening? Puzzled thoughts flashed in his mind, and the Count fell to the ground in a crash. He didn't understand why he flew into the sky and began to fight as a Sky Knight, but he still couldn't stop List's attack. His water-attributed Chi was known for its toughness, but it was vulnerable in front of the fire-attributed Chi. "I am a sword saint. It shouldn't be, my Chi should be stronger." Bang. The moment he was about to land, the Count turned his body in time and stepped on the rocks of the rocky beach, crushing the rocks. With the counterforce and the gushing Chi, he rose again. He narrowly avoided List, who accelerated his attack with the help of the fall. Boom. The fire-attributed Chi exploded on the ground, and the surrounding rocks of the beach for dozens of meters all exploded. List didn't stop at all. He swung the sky cutter sword again and again, and the chi spewed out tens of meters away from the blade. Burning red clouds. The chi turned into flames, just grabbed the back of the count who was rising into the air, and instantly broke up the count's water-attributed chi, so that the count could no longer continue to fly. Scorching sun stab. His figure rushed forward, and with the help of the sky cutter sword, he rushed to the front of the count. The flame turned into a drill, easily destroying the count's temporarily released blue and white chi. From beginning to end, the count's chi couldn't change qualitatively and trigger a natural phenomenon. Every time the chi collided, it would be crushed by the fire-attributed chi. Moreover, he had to release several times the amount of do chi in order to resist the corrosion of the fire attribute do chi that seemed slow but was actually fast. This was a situation that had never happened in his countless sword battles. Boom. The chi was blown away again. The count just wanted to release it again, but it was too late. The sky cutter sword pierced out of the flames and went straight to his neck. Just one more inch and it would pierce the skin. He even felt the tingling and burning sensation on his neck, which was the pressure formed by the sword's tip squeezing the air. He even vaguely felt the threat of death. It was a deep sense of powerlessness. In his sword-fighting career, he had almost never experienced this feeling. The sword fight always ended with him defeating his opponent. Even if he failed several times, he could easily escape. But this time, it was a crushing defeat. He had almost no power to fight back. From beginning to end, he was passively beaten until his chi collapsed. The long sword was on his body. There was nothing else he could do. At the critical moment, the sky cutter sword stopped and slowly retracted. The flames that filled the sky quickly dissipated, revealing a handsome face gasping for breath. "Father, you were careless." List suppressed his rapid breathing and broke the silence of the scene with a calm tone. His eyes were as bright as stars and his face had regained its calm. In fact, he was ecstatic. He thought it would be a bitter battle, but who would have thought that it would be a one-sided crushing? The ocean wave sword sage, whose fighting strength ranked in the top 10 in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, was so easily defeated by him that he couldn't even escape. After a burst of fighting, the battle was over. He had won without any sloppiness. He had become the #1 expert of Coral Island. His mood at this moment could not be described in words. It could only be said that he was overjoyed. If he had not seen the complex expression on the face of the count, he would have laughed out loud. Now he had to put away the sky cutter sword, lower his head, and try to suppress his laughter. He secretly looked at the count out of the corner of his eye. On the count's face, anger, annoyance, fear, gratification, excitement, confusion, and other expressions alternated, constantly twisting and folding, forming a tangled, bashful, and awkward expression. It flickered for a while. Chapter 5:16. Was the count careless? No. But at this time the father and son did not need to exchange glances. They still had a tacit understanding and dealt with it according to the count's carelessness. List did not say that he won, so the count did not have to admit that he lost. The two found their mounts, led their mounts, and slowly walked. The count gradually calmed his mood. Whether he could accept reality or not for the time being, was not a question. The one who defeated him was none other than his son, which meant that he could not always be upset. A father had the thought of wanting his son to become a dragon, hoping that his descendants would be stronger than him. List did it. He had no reason to be depressed. But it was also not easy to make him happy at once. After all, he was used to his identity as Coral Island's #1 expert. Apart from Grand Dukes who might succeed in riding dragons, Lee William was not afraid of others, even if it was a sacred swordsman of perfection. Inconceivably, in front of List, he did not run away. "I can no longer evaluate your growth. I am 46 years old in the prime of my life. You are 18 years old, not yet a birthday. I remember you said before that your goal is to ride dragons. Every young man has the dream of riding dragons. Only in middle age will they give up unrealistic fantasies. As for you," the count looked at the elegant List. He wanted to say something, but he did not continue. He felt that List had the hope of riding dragons. However, every sacred swordsman of perfection Sky Knight had the hope of riding dragons, but where would he find a suitable dragon? Therefore there was no need to say this. He lowered his head and raised his eyes, wanting to see the hair that had been burnt by the fire. He could not see it clearly, nor did he have a mirror, so he could only touch it with his hand. It did not feel very good to the touch, especially at the hairline on his forehead, which seemed to be a little bit missing. This made his originally calm mood abruptly worsen, and his tone became particularly stern. "List, Do you know what people fear the most when they reach middle age? What? List asked absent-mindedly. It's the hairline. Even someone as strong as the Grand Duke, who consumes countless nourishing ingredients every day to maintain his body, still can't stop his hairline from constantly receding. As your father, I don't have a handsome face. My hairline is the only thing I can rely on. List was confused. But you heard it. Father, your hairline does not give people the feeling that it is unattainable. My Do-Chi flame only burned off a strand of your hair. It did not damage your hairline. Really? Yes. All right, I forgive you. The Earl breathed a sigh of relief and then asked, I'm very curious. We both have high-level combat chi, but why can't my sword saint-level combat chi stop your ordinary high-level combat chi? It's even showing signs of collapsing. Maybe it's because I'm gifted. List focused his attention and answered helplessly. He did not expect that the battle would be so one-sided. The suppressive effect of the dragon's Do-Chi on ordinary Do-Chi was so terrifying. Otherwise, he would have restrained himself to reduce the possibility of exposure. He was not ready to tell his family the secret of the little fire dragon. When it came to riding a dragon, he could not be too careful. Once he was exposed, it was easy to imagine that the Grand Duke would never let him go. He would do everything in his power to snatch the little fire dragon away. The allure of a dragon, especially a young dragon, could never be overestimated. After all, it was the easiest for a young dragon to establish a relationship with a knight and become a dragon knight. The dragon knight was the pinnacle of power in the world. Who could not be addicted to it? Fortunately, his opponent was the Earl, his own father. Even if there were some secrets, he could easily dodge it. The nature of my Do-Chi is relatively special. It is very corrosive and my fighting style is strong and explosive. As long as I seize the initiative, it will be an endless wave of attacks. This reason was a bit lame. But the Earl did not go into it. First, he was not in a good mood, and second, he did not want to get to the bottom of it with his son. In particular, List's strength could already crush him. In this world where the strong were king, even if List was only his son, he still had to give him a great deal of respect. You haven't entered the level of Sword Saint yet, right? Not yet. When can you advance? List deliberated. It's hard to say. Try to advance within a year. Hearing this, the Earl paused, directly mounted his horse, threw down the words, I'm proud of you. Then he rode his leopard horse and galloped towards Tulip Castle. The Earl galloped away. List rode Loki, slowly walking along the quiet path. His eyes were locked on the void in front of him. It was a cloud of smoke that others could not see. As early as after defeating the Earl, he had called out the smoke mission, wanting to know who his old friend was. Mission completed. Reward, invisible dragons hovering. Invisible dragon, it's actually the invisible dragon? When he first saw the invisible dragon, he was both surprised and delighted. The invisible dragon was a treasure giver. The space gem was of great help to him. But what puzzled him was, why is the invisible dragon my old friend? When did I become friends with it? When the invisible dragon visited the flower town and ate 2 cows, it roared and left. List hid in the tunnel the whole time, not daring to show his face. With this kind of behavior, you can't call it a friend at all. However, after thinking for a moment, he recalled why the smoke mission called the invisible dragon his old friend. It was because of the night novel Earth Ranger Griff's Travels, which was the original source of information about the invisible dragon. The author of the novel, Griff, used smoke grass and beef to attract the invisible dragon. He also said that the space gem was the proof of the friendship between him and the invisible dragon. He now knew the meaning of old friend. List carefully looked at the smoke serpentines in front of him. Mission: the invisible dragon is hovering outside its territory. It doesn't remember where it was. Bathe in the intoxicating fragrance and eat the delicious beef. Perhaps it will descend again the moment you ignite the smoke grass. Reward: the invisible dragon's gift. I forgot the flower town's coordinates. This is a great opportunity. I can make a good arrangement and obtain the greatest harvest. I believe that this invisible dragon's gift will be even more abundant than the last time. The last time, apart from the space gem, the invisible dragon's gift also included 4 dragon cows as well as several other affected cows. This time, List planned to make a careful arrangement and maximize the benefits brought by the invisible dragon. He had seen the majesty of the dragon and understood that he couldn't keep the invisible dragon for the time being. He could only fish for as many benefits as possible. According to the notes I made on dragons, dragons need to be excited to infect other species to release their bloodline. Probably, the production of gems also needs to be excited. When the invisible dragon visits again, I need to make it feel at home and thoroughly excited. The more excited the invisible dragon was, the more space gems it would leave behind and the stronger the influence of its bloodline would be. List licked his lips. Chapter 517. After returning to the castle, no one mentioned the outcome of the sword fight. Since the two parties involved did not mention it, the others only thought that the father and son were exchanging pointers. Since it was a spar, there was no question of victory or defeat. However, the Count was still a bit embarrassed, especially when Madame Marie asked, "Dear, why is the hair in front of your forehead missing? Does it look like it was burned?" Fortunately, Liszt quick-wittedly helped the Count out. "I'm sorry, Madame Marie. When father was instructing me, I accidentally used too much force, causing my chi to burst and burning a strand of father's hair. Fortunately, it did not affect his hairline, it really did not affect it." Madame Marie smiled. "You are all Sky Knights with powerful attack power. You must pay attention to safety when practicing." Liszt nodded. "Please rest assured. Of course we will be careful. Madam, you don't have to worry." The Count echoed and then immediately changed the subject. "Today's schedule seems to be to accompany mother to watch a farce. Why didn't you go? If you don't want to watch a farce, then invite mother over and have a chat with Liszt." "Mother didn't let me accompany her. She went to the flower market today to pick out potted plants. Recently, she gave away a batch of potted plants as gifts and needed to replenish them. She really treats her potted plants as treasures. Apart from the 2 sprite worms Liszt obtained, no other potted plants have given birth to sprite worms. Right? Do the potted plants she gave to Lytton look like they are going to breed sprite worms?" The Count said helplessly. Madame Penelope was obsessed with her potted plants ever since the 2 potted plants gave birth to the black nightshade sprite worm and the fig sprite worm, believing that the potted plants she took care of were the best gifts for breeding sprite worms. She only gave potted plants as gifts. This made many people dissatisfied, believing that the old madam was actually reluctant to spend money. On her birthday, people gave expensive gifts. When it was the turn of others to receive gifts, she only gave potted plants worth a few copper coins or at most a few silver coins. Liszt smiled at the side. In any case, he had made a profit. The 3 chatted for a while. The atmosphere was not warm, but it was not awkward either. However, they did not have much in common with each other. The Count did not want to talk about cultivation, and Liszt did not want to talk about his personal life. Seeing that it was already 10 o'clock in the morning, he said, "Father, Madame Marie, I am going out to Coral City to buy a batch of living supplies. Go, don't be late for lunch." "All right." Buying daily necessities was just an excuse. He didn't need to prepare his own necessities. He was preparing for the visit of the invisible dragon again. From now on, he had to make preparations to squeeze the invisible dragon dry and obtain the greatest benefits. The invisible dragon loves to smell the smoke grass. I need to prepare a smoke grass paradise. It would be best if it is densely packed with smoke grass hay. When ignited at the same time, it will form a grand fireworks stage. I believe the invisible dragon will be intoxicated in the fragrance of the smoke grass and be unable to extricate itself. Smoke grass was a specialty of his territory, so he didn't need to worry too much about it. At most, he would use different methods to extract the taste of the smoke grass, burning the hay to form smoke, mashing the tender grass juice for spraying, and then secretly making some smoke grass paste for spreading on food. The food must be beef. I need to prepare several fresh beef cows, adult cows and calves. Cooked beef must also be braised, pan-fried, deep-fried, boiled, and all kinds of seasonings must be added. The invisible dragon must enjoy the charm of a cow banquet. The territory didn't raise beef cows, so he had to buy them from Coral Island's livestock market. He also had to hire a beef chef to help in the territory. Liszt wrapped his body in his cloak. After passing through the smelly streets in a low-key manner, he appeared in the flower caravan's office in Coral City. Naturally, he didn't need to buy beef himself. The caravan captain, Harpagon, was listening to his orders, various breeds of cattle as well as a beef chef. "Harpagon, this is the most important thing you need to do in the next 3 days." "I understand, Sir Lord." 3 days was the preparation time that Liszt had set. If the time was too short, he wouldn't be able to make sufficient preparations. If the time was too long, he was afraid that the invisible dragon would slip away or visit ahead of time. If it really did visit ahead of time without proper preparations, not only would it cause heavy losses to the territory, but it would also expose the secret of the invisible dragon. At that time, there would definitely be a lot of trouble. Therefore he only gave himself 3 days to make full preparations. Harpagon, there is one more thing. Hire a group of chefs who can cook lamb, horse, pork, chicken and all other meat dishes. Although the invisible dragon liked to eat beef, it didn't mean that it didn't like other meats. List didn't think that the invisible dragon could survive by eating beef alone. According to the dragon-raising handbook he obtained from the bull marquee desk, dragons were carnivores. Different dragons liked to eat different foods. Some dragons even ate stones or wood. They seemed to have a picky taste, but most of them liked to eat meat. The invisible dragon was obviously a carnivore. Beef was recorded in the Earth Ranger Griff's travels, but there was no guarantee that the invisible dragon didn't eat other meats. Therefore, List had to prepare rich meat to fill the invisible dragon's stomach and conquer its taste buds. Not only that, he also had Harpagon collect all kinds of drinks from the market to serve as a meal drink for the invisible dragon to enjoy. If the invisible dragon got drunk, wouldn't it be? List felt excited just thinking about it. After lunch at Tulip Castle, List hurriedly returned to Flower Town and dispatched a large number of smoked grass hay from the warehouse to Black Horse Island. He decided to place the invisible dragon's dining table in the wilderness of Black Horse Island. There were many places on Black Horse Island where serfs were not active, which was very suitable for contact with the invisible dragon. At the same time, he also had the serfs pull up a large number of new and tender smoked grass, especially the high-quality smoked grass around the cordyceps. The serfs, wearing thick masks, mashed the tender leaves into juice, sealed them in glass bottles and transported them to Black Horse Island. As for List himself, he selected suitable livestock overnight, ready to accept the invisible dragon's magic infection and obtain the dragon's blood. The magic of the blood released by the invisible dragon should be very limited. Otherwise, the world would be full of dragon-type creatures, so the number of infected spots would be limited. He pondered. First of all, there were already dragon-type horses, and the black blood horse race was slowly growing, so there was no need to occupy any spots. Second, there were already dragon-type cows, but they were few in number. There were only 4 of them, and they were close relatives, which was not conducive to future reproduction. He could bring 2 or 3 pregnant cows to add new dragon-type calves. Next, poultry such as chickens, ducks, and geese were relatively small and their demand for magic was probably very small. He could choose to bring a batch of female cows together with their hatched eggs. Then, pork would be the main source of meat in the territory. It was obviously necessary to have a group of dragon-type pigs, so he could bring a few pregnant sows. Again, he could choose a batch of mallard eggs and bring them over. It would be wonderful if a dragon-type mallard was created. Basically, it can be guessed that creatures in the embryonic stage are most likely to be infected by the dragon's blood. So do I need to bring a batch of adult individuals? He then thought of Dosen and the 8 small ones. If he created them into an intermediate dragon species, World of Warcraft, their power would definitely increase greatly. However, the last time the invisible dragon visited, the adult cows did not evolve into dragon-type cows. It could be seen that the bloodline of the adult creatures had solidified and was difficult to infect. Stupid Woman was already in reproductive isolation and could no longer give birth, basically cutting off the hope of Dosen's descendants and becoming a dragon. Moreover, to turn Trembling Woods into a dragon beast, I am afraid that it will take a lot of blood magic. I have so many species that I need to infect and I really can't give much magic to Trembling Woods. Forget it, Trembling Woods and the others have achieved extraordinary achievements. This time I will not consider the Blizzard Beast. Chapter 518. List did not add any new infected species to the list. He was a little worried that if the invisible dragon was not as excited as he thought, the blood infection magic released might not be enough to infect too many species. Besides, I already have a little fire dragon. When this guy is born, it should not be difficult to create some dragon species. There is no need to rush. The invisible dragon was a dragon that was difficult to catch. If he could squeeze it dry, of course he would. If he really could not squeeze it dry, it was not a big deal. With the mini fire dragon in his heart, he had enough confidence. At this point he had completed the list of infected species: 3 pregnant cows, 2 pregnant sows, 10 green-headed duck eggs waiting to hatch, an old hen laying eggs and 5 eggs, a hen laying eggs and 5 duck eggs, and 1 laying eggs. Well, there were no geese in the territory for the time being. The chickens and ducks must be the healthiest chickens and ducks, and their eggs must be fertilized. Early the next morning, before shipping, List repeated the selection criteria again. Sir, you can rest assured that this batch of eggs and duck eggs are the best chickens and ducks in the process of hatching. We have put them in cages with their nests and brought them here. Protect the cows and fat pigs, don't let them get hurt. Understood. The cargo ship pulled all the prepared supplies and sped towards Black Horse Island, finally arriving before dark. List had arrived at Black Horse Island ahead of time on the flowers. The picnic site he chose for the invisible dragon was located north of Tea Tree Town, the northernmost point of Black Horse Island. It was an extension of the Ice Grass Hill. Originally there were some shrubs scattered here and there, but since the volcanic glass mining, all the shrubs were dug up and burned as firewood. A few weeds had begun to emerge in the reclaimed wasteland, and the temperature hovered around 0 degrees. The snow had just melted, causing the area to be very muddy. However, Gort, who had been notified last night, had already brought the serfs to the construction site. They mainly came to dig tunnels. List sent a ship overnight to deliver the drawings. They needed to dig a cross-shaped tunnel with a circular tunnel in the middle. The cross-shaped and circular tunnels divided the picnic site into 4 regions: northwest, southwest, southeast, and northeast. At the same time, List also requested to place 8 smoking points above the circular tunnel. He could hide in the circular tunnel and light all the smoking points one by one to release the smell of the smoking grass. At the same time, in the middle of the cross-shaped tunnel was the location of the dining table. All the food and drinks would be placed here. List would personally sprinkle the juices of the smoked grass around the dining table. There were also a few large pots where the smoked grass would be continuously cooked. Right under the dining table, there was an entrance to the underground tunnel, which allowed List to hide in it freely. He could then follow the cross-shaped tunnel to the circular tunnel. Wooden houses would be built in the 4 areas of the picnic site, housing sows, cows, chickens and ducks and green-headed ducks respectively. Equally distribute the bloodline infection magic power released by the invisible dragon when it was excited. Sir, may I know why you built these tunnels and sent these things? Blair, who was in charge of arranging for the chef to cook the food, asked curiously. List casually dismissed him. I need to practice high-grade chi here. This is a special practice method. You don't need to ask too much. Also, pay attention to confidentiality, understand? Blair's spirit was immediately shaken. Understood, sir. He didn't know what high-grade chi looked like, let alone how to practice it. He believed whatever List said. Everyone, including the others, believed that what List said was the reason. The practice method of a sky knight was, of course, different from that of an ordinary knight. Even if there were some doubts, no one dared to question List. Thus, including the previous half a day of busyness in 3.5 days, the picnic site had completely changed. On the ground in the center, which was paved with dry straws, delicious food was arranged in order, and jars of wine decorated them. There were also living old cows, bulls, cows, calves and calves that had just been born. In addition, there were a large number of sealed glass bottles filled with smoked grass juice. The morning sun shone on the earth. List came to the picnic site alone. Everyone, including his mount, was at least a few kilometers away from this place. He flew high into the sky and hurried on his way, checking the infected pigs, cows, chickens, ducks and eggs in the 4 areas and turned to ensure that everything was normal. Then he used the last bit of fire dragon magic power to feed the mini fire dragon. After ensuring that it would not sense the invisible dragon's magic power, it would mess around. He couldn't predict what would happen when dragons meet each other and could only avoid it as much as possible. Almost there. When I ignite the smoke grass around me, the smoke mission will be completed, and the invisible dragon will soon arrive. There is not much time left for me. List took a deep breath. He put on his mask, released magic eyes, and carefully observed the surrounding sky to ensure that the invisible dragon had not yet appeared. Then he grabbed the sealed glass bottles, quickly opened them and sprinkled the juice around the table. He then opened the mixed smoke grass sauce and smeared it on the cows. Then he put the young smoke grass into the pot of boiling water. The disgusting smell spread. Even though he was wearing a mask, List's stomach acid welled up and he almost vomited. The cows that were smeared with the sauce foamed at the mouth, swayed and almost fainted. Resisting the urge to vomit, he poured out the last bottle of smoke grass juice, took out a match and ignited a large bundle of smoke grass on the table. Looking up at the sky, he saw that the invisible dragon had not yet arrived. List did not dare to stay. He quickly drilled into the tunnel next to him, picked up the prepared stones and blocked the tunnel. Then he ran along the tunnel towards the circular tunnel. Following the circular tunnel, he lit the smoke grass above one by one. All these actions were done in 5 minutes. Even with his physical fitness as a sky knight, he was sweating all over after running around. Finally, he hid in a bunker that had been prepared long ago. Through the window, he peeped at the dining table not far away as well as the sky above it. The air was filled with the smell of smoked grass. The flames burned and billowing smoke rose into the sky, accompanied by the mooing of cows, grunting of pigs, crowing of chickens and crying of ducks. "Hurry up and join the banquet, old friend." List took off his clothes stained with the smell of smoked grass and threw them into the water tank in the bunker. He summoned the smoke mission. He saw the completion prompt. Mission completed. Reward, Gem of the Invisible Dragon. Gem of the Invisible Dragon? Aren't the bloodline-infected dragon-type lifeforms included in the reward? List had some doubts in his heart, but he did not get entangled. The 4 dragon-type cows with bloodline infection last time were also not included in the Invisible Dragon's gift. It was probably because the bloodline infection needed time to brew. The smoke in front of him slowly changed, forming new serpentines. Just as he saw the serpentines, List's gaze froze in the blink of an eye. Chapter 519. This chapter is My Horse Feeds the Sheep. The Rebirth of a Fire Dragon. Seeing this reward, List could not help but feel short of breath. Since the recovery of the dragon bones, he has been looking forward to the birth of a fire dragon again and again. However, he first created a magic fire seed, then a budding magic fire seed, and then a small fire dragon in the form of a fire seed. He tossed and turned back and forth but still couldn't make it. Although the birth of a fire dragon was tortuous, the benefits of a fire dragon were obvious. Relying on Dragon Chi, he could rely on the ordinary level of a Sky Knight to crush the Sword Saint level Sky Knight. His strength was amazing. And now, the small fire dragon, which had lived in his heart for a long time, was finally born. Dragon. A real dragon. With the relationship between me and the mini fire dragon, is it a Dragon Knight contract between us? List suppressed the surprise and thought. In any case, with his hard work, the small fire dragon should not turn its back on him after it was born. If it dared to turn its back on him, List would dare to slay the dragon on the spot and get the title of hero. Slaying a newborn dragon should also be regarded as a dragon slayer warrior. There was not much time left for him to think. As soon as he looked up, there were signs of magic power in the vision of magic eyes. In the sky above the distant sea, there was a chaotic gray-white magic light. The light was getting closer and gradually its shape could be seen. It was the invisible dragon that List remembered. It was not big. Compared to the sapphire dragon, it was actually very small. Its body was only the size of a cabin, and its wings only added 2 more cabins. It was slimmer than the dragons in the illustrations of night novels, and its tail was very long. It had bat-like wings, 2 short and thin front legs, 2 slightly thicker hind legs, and a whole row of dragon horns was very eye-catching. Unfortunately, when List dispersed magic eyes, he could no longer peek at its appearance. He could only use magic eyes again and outline its figure through the magic light of its body. The light at the teeth was the brightest, and the 42 dragon teeth were clearly visible. It was not unreasonable to say that the dragon's soul lived in the dragon teeth. It's finally here. List's thoughts were inexplicably complicated. Following the smoke formed by the burning of the smoke grass, the invisible dragon spiraled down from the sky. Before it landed, its terrifying dragon power, which made people tremble with fear, had already spread out. Wuxia. A strange, sharp and goosebump-inducing whistling sound accompanied the descent of the invisible dragon from not too far away. As expected, List had goosebumps all over his body, and fear rose in his heart for no reason. Even though I've become a Sky Knight now, I still can't resist the Firebird, and my body naturally reacts to it. It seems that the Firebird is a higher level of magic power. It can't be seen or touched, but it really exists. The magic eye could see the magic power in the dragon's body, but it could not see the dragon's might. Of course, whether the dragon's might was magic or not was debatable. Hula, hula. When the invisible dragon landed, it flapped its wings continuously, stirring up the surrounding smoke and messing up the various arranged food. It could be imagined that the ground would be in a mess as soon as it landed. Really rude. List struggled to resist the Firebird. He could already feel that the Firebird not only aroused goosebumps on his skin, but also made the sleeping mini fire dragon in his body show signs of waking up. At the location of his heart, there was a rhythmic beat. This was not a good sign. If the mini fire dragon went berserk now, it would undoubtedly expose itself. List was not sure if he could face the invisible dragon as a Sky Knight. He could only try to convey his emotions to the mini fire dragon at the location of his heart, communicating as usual, sleep quietly or you will starve in the future. The rhythm paused for a moment. Then it continued to move. List could not help but increase the emotional input. Sleep quietly or you won't be able to eat anything. Rhythm. Sleep quietly. Rhythm. Sleep quietly. Rhythm. You're courting death. Roar. Half asleep and half awake, the mini fire dragon let out a submissive sound and then stopped its rhythm. List heaved a sigh of relief and continued to look at the invisible dragon. This beautiful and boorish big guy had already started to enjoy the few live cows tied to the wooden stakes. It seemed to prefer the calves. It seemed to have no interest in the cooked food around it. The claws on its wings casually tore, and the calves screamed as they were dismembered. Then the calves were stuffed into its big mouth and chewed. It was unknown how its tongue and teeth worked together, but very quickly, it spat out a pile of ox bones without any residue. Its efficiency was superb. After eating the calves, it let out another sharp and resounding dragon cry, Wuxia. In the bunker, List's whirlpool-like eyes shone brightly. This cry seems to be a bit excited. It seems to be high from eating? The invisible dragon on the dining table did not know that someone was secretly spying on it while it was eating. Perhaps it had already sensed List's existence, but it was not interested in rummaging through an insect hiding underground. However, judging from its eating habits, it was still very vigilant, raising its head from time to time to look around. It also took a few more glances at List. List discovered this situation during the previous visit of the invisible dragon, but he did not think much about it. This time, however, he had a different thought. As an existence at the top of the food chain, the pinnacle of power in this world, what else does a dragon need to be vigilant about? Even if it is another dragon, isn't it just a matter of a fight? Dragons were not social creatures, and it was almost impossible to find two dragons together. Was there a need to be so vigilant when a creature with no natural enemies was eating? List did not know, but he suspected that the reason why the invisible dragon was so vigilant was because there was something that could threaten it. Something that could threaten a dragon. Stroking his chin, List thought, perhaps the invisible dragon is just a young dragon? If it was a young dragon, then it was normal to be so vigilant. Before it grew up, it had 100 years of infancy, so it was certainly not powerful enough. List needed to be cautious. Its body is indeed very small. Other dragons are dozens of meters long, but it is less than 10 meters at most, including its tail. This kind of body was only a few sizes bigger than a chocobo. Even standing on the ground, if Loki did not raise his head, he might be a bit taller than the invisible dragon. After all, Loki had a pair of long legs. List watched as the invisible dragon, who had finished eating the calf, began to search the cooked food on the ground, and was even using its legs to scratch around. A fiery thought suddenly flashed in List's mind. If it is a young dragon, can I capture it? I am a Sky Knight and I have dragon chi. It is just a young dragon, why can't I subdue it? Those Dragon Knight can subdue a dragon with the strength of a perfection Sky Knight before riding a dragon. If others can ride a dragon, so can I. List was shocked by his own thoughts, but he could not suppress them. He had always believed that he revered safety first, but whenever danger and opportunity coexisted, an impulse to take risks would always emerge in the depths of his heart. Ride a dragon. Ride a dragon. Ride a dragon. This thought emerged and he was almost unable to suppress it. However, just as he was about to jump out and madly rush towards the invisible dragon, his heart suddenly tightened as if it was being grasped by a hand. It was the mini fire dragon that began to go berserk. He could not help but let out a muffled groan from the pain, and all his thoughts dissipated. All that was left was nervous communication and appeasing the mini fire dragon. Sleep quietly. Roar. Sleep quietly. Roar. If you make any more noise, I will kill you. Roar. The mini fire dragon quieted down again. Chapter 520. Wuxia. Smoke lingered in the air. The peculiar smell of smoke grass filled the area within a radius of several kilometers. The cries of cows, pigs and chickens and ducks could no longer be heard. It was unknown whether they fainted because of the smell of smoke grass or because of the invisible dragon's might. Magic Eye's vision penetrated the smoke and could vaguely see what the invisible dragon was doing. After eating the calf, it became a picky eater. It took a bite from the left side and threw it off. It took a bite from the right side and threw it off again. List didn't know whether it ate other food or not. Occasionally it would lick the wine in the water jar, but it didn't throw it in. It seemed that it had no love for wine. Wuxia. It suddenly raised its head and let out another sharp cry. Its meaning was unclear. It was unknown whether it was eating happily or feeling bored. However, it didn't leave and was still being picky about food on the table. It was clear that it wasn't bored and was still enjoying the picnic. Then it suddenly aimed at a kind of food and gorged on it. It simply sat on the ground and used the claws on its wings to grab food and stuff it into its mouth. Occasionally, it would stick its head into the water jar filled with wine and lick its tongue. Very good, there is wine and meat. This meal will definitely make you feel comfortable. Hurry up and get excited. List clutched his chest, his eyes firmly locked on the invisible dragon. He was almost unable to suppress the small fire dragon's rampage, but he had to suppress it and didn't dare to expose it. Leave behind the gems, release the bloodline infection magic power, and then leave in one piece. He was very conflicted. On one hand, he hoped that the invisible dragon would happily eat the picnic and leave behind the treasures, but on the other hand, he hoped that it would leave early so that he could deal with the increasingly rampage of the small fire dragon. The mini fire dragon was about to be unable to be pacified. It was unprecedentedly excited. It was similar to the excitement of a drunkard. The invisible dragon hasn't gotten excited yet, but you got excited first. Later, when I have free time, I will teach you how to be a dragon. He took a deep breath and operated his chi. He had to divide half of his energy to suppress the small fire dragon's rampage. Time slowly passed in this deadlock. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of an hour had passed. On the other side, the invisible dragon had been eating and drinking while letting out Wuxia sounds for a while. It was certainly excited, but it was unknown how much bloodline infection magic power it could release and how many space gems it could produce. Suddenly, the invisible dragon let out Wuxia sounds again and walked away from the dining table, crawling like a bat, with its wings on the ground to maintain balance. And the direction it was crawling in was the direction of List's bunker. After crawling for a few steps, it suddenly spread its wings and took off. You're leaving? Just as List was thinking this, the invisible dragon suddenly landed. The place where it landed happened to be the bunker where List was located. Practically without waiting for List to respond, the invisible dragon had already accurately landed 5 meters in front of the bunker. It raised its head and let out a long Wuxia. Splitting his energy to suppress Charmander caused List's reaction to become a little slow. At this time he remembered to shrink back into the tunnel and quickly escape. But his eyes fall on. The invisible dragon in front of him was boiling with mana, undergoing some kind of change. List couldn't see its eyes, but he could feel that it was staring at him. It was a very strange feeling. There was no hostility in his eyes. List's mind moved and he no longer moved. Instead, he dispersed his magic eyes and restored his normal naked eye vision. With this look, he immediately discovered that the invisible dragon in front of the bunker was no longer invisible. It had revealed its figure. It was like a mass of flowing mercury, flickering with a faint 5-colored radiance. I can actually see the invisible dragon? It showed itself and let me see it? What does this mean? Is it described in The Travels of the Earth Ranger Griff that I gained the friendship of the invisible dragon? List stood in front of the window of the bunker. He was cautious and did not move, but his brain was working at high speed to analyze the current situation. The invisible dragon's posture did not seem like it was going to hunt. When it came to hunting, stealth was the best choice. Unless he wanted to play a game of cat and mouse, there was no need to reveal himself. So, should I go out and meet it now? Looking at the slender figure of the invisible dragon, he hesitated for a long time. A dragon was a dragon. Just by standing there, the dragon's might had already oppressed the Sky Knight to the point of suffocation, let alone face-to-face communication. A minute quickly passed. The invisible dragon did not continue to approach the bunker. It just revealed its body and then sat on the ground looking at the bunker. List was constantly struggling. He wanted to go out, but he did not dare to go out. He really wanted the mini fire dragon in his heart to make a ruckus and interrupt his impulse. However, the mini fire dragon was unreasonably well behaved at the moment and did not move at all. Should I go out or not? With the power of a dragon, even if I hide in the tunnel, it can still easily catch me, right? So, go out? He fiercely clenched his teeth and made a decision. Then I will go out a bit more unyielding and show my good demeanor. In this way, even if I am killed by the dragon, I will at least die with dignity. Immediately, he shook off the dirt on his clothes, pushed away the stone blocking the entrance of the bunker, and walked out of the bunker with a nervous heart and a calm appearance. The stench of smoke grass permeated the air outside. Even though he was wearing a mask, he still could not resist it. It was nauseating. To his credit, this nauseating smell actually eliminated a lot of his nervousness, making him relax a lot. The invisible dragon 5 meters away was still staring at List. Its sitting posture was relatively tall, just enough to block the rising sun behind it, gilding it with a layer of gold. Compared to the form outlined by magic power, its current form truly showed the graceful posture of a dragon. Every line was incomparably beautiful. In particular, its long and narrow triangular head had a sense of beauty that combined the elegance of a lady and the demeanor of a gentleman. Its eyes were also long and narrow. They did not appear sinister, but instead had a strange charm. The pupils of its eyes were deep black, revealing a human-like flavor. It opened its mouth and softly cried, "Wuxia." It didn't attack me. Sure enough, it is not hostile to me. List could not understand what the other party was shouting, but he knew that he did not make a wrong decision. The invisible dragon's behavior was very friendly. So he unhurriedly walked toward the invisible dragon. The distance of 5 meters only took a few steps. They were already face to face, sizing each other up at close range. "Wuxia. What? Wuxia. I don't understand." The dragon and the human communicated in this manner. After a few sounds, it seemed to have discovered that List was a fool. The invisible dragon's long and narrow eyes revealed a touch of helplessness. Then it quietly raised its left forelimb, stretched it out, and shook it. Then it shouted at List, "Wuxia. What? Do you want me to put my face on it?" For no reason, List thought of a short video he had seen. A man stretched out his hand, and his girlfriend immediately put her face on his hand. Every time a man stretched out his hand, no matter what the girlfriend was doing, she would run over and put her face on his hand. He did not know the significance of this. In any case, after watching the video, he was very angry. He hated people who showed off their affection the most. Of course, the invisible dragon would not be so senseless. List's thoughts flashed, and he immediately understood its meaning. Then he also learned to stretch out his left hand. The next moment. Chapter 521. It opened its mouth. It spat out 3 diamond-like, fingernail-sized gems. This was the entire action of the invisible dragon. It left 3 space gems for List and then let out a resounding "Wuxia" sound. Its hind legs stamped on the ground, its wings unfolded, and it soared into the sky, flying into the distance without looking back. It did not remain invisible and maintained its mercury-like appearance. The flickering multicolored radiance, like a rainbow, gradually flew away. Looking at the restored calm sky, List clenched the space gem in his hand, feeling disappointed and frustrated. His first intimate contact with a real living dragon happened and ended. The so-called Dragon Knight's dream obviously did not fall on the invisible dragon. He had to go back and coax the little fire dragon. But it's worth it. 3 space gems plus the original one, the invisible dragon gave me 4 space gems. The value of the 4 space gems was incalculable. In fact, the value of any space gem was priceless. This kind of gem with an independent space was basically a legendary item that couldn't be bought with money. Thanks to the generosity of his old friend, List already had 4. He could be called a nouveau riche. "I'll wear 2 on my left hand and 2 on my right. Arrange it." List was instantly elated. Of course, he would not make it into a ring. He still chose to keep it close to his body to prevent exposure. The invisible dragon had already left. List put away the space gems and walked towards the dining table. Along the way, he carefully searched to see if the invisible dragon had missed any additional space gems. However, when he used magic eyes to search the entire messy muddy ground inch by inch, he did not find anything. At this point he realized something. It seems that dragons can actively control the production of gems. Moreover, it is very likely that the space gems dropped by the invisible dragon last time were deliberately left behind by it as a meal ticket. From the fact that the invisible dragon took the initiative to find him and left behind 3 space gems, it could be seen that the invisible dragon's intelligence was definitely not low. It was well aware that this picnic did not grow naturally, but humans deliberately fawned on it. Therefore, after it finished eating, it left behind money for the meal. Not freeloading. Not freeloading. Speaking of this invisible dragon, sure enough, dragons have no gender. Its crotch is bare without any reproductive tools. But it seems that I didn't even find its excretory orifices, so how did it excrete dragon feces? According to the Dragon Raising Handbook, the excrement of a dragon is a kind of fluid? The Dragon Rearing Manual had a more detailed description of dragons, and part of it was about dragon dung. Dragon excrement was not the same as the excrement of ordinary creatures. It was a fluid like water. After it was released from the excretory hole, it quickly melted into the ground and formed crystal veins in the nearby area. It could be said, many of the crystal utensils used by nobles were evolved from dragon excrement. Even the crystal utensils in List's castle were transformed from dragon excrement. However, just like the magic residue excreted by Charmander, dragons were different creatures after all. All of their composition could be explained by magic. From the gestation of Charmander, this could be proved. Dragons were made of magic and were born from magic. Such a creature, even its feces, was a valuable product. Unfortunately, elves did not excrete feces. Otherwise, the feces of elves might also be an important resource. So, when the invisible dragon ate just now, it didn't excrete? If it excreted, there should be crystals under the surface nearby. I wonder what kind of crystals the invisible dragon formed. Crystals were usually associated with gems and had the same properties. But their quality was far lower than gems and could only be used as a material for magic equipment. After exhausting the remaining magic of the dragon, the crystals would become pure crystals that only looked good. Half an hour later. No gems were found. No crystal mines were found. List no longer did useless work. He went to the wooden house and examined the 3 cows. He found that the cows had all fainted and were foaming at the mouth. If they were not still breathing, List would have suspected that they were already dead. The 2 fat pigs also fainted and urinated on the ground, leaving only their breathing. I hope you can give birth to the dragon cows and pigs as soon as possible. The due date of the 3 cows will probably be in autumn, and the 2 fat pigs should be able to give birth in a month and a half. The gestation period of a cow was about 280 days, close to 9 months. It was now the end of February. Counting the days of pregnancy, the calves would be born in September or October. The gestation period of a pig was about 114 days, that is, 3 months, 3 weeks and 3 days, so calves could be born in April. The good mood of looking forward to seeing the dragon cows and pigs disappeared as he entered the wooden house of the chickens and ducks. Because List found that the hens and ducks in the cages had died. They were either scared to death by the dragon's might or died of oppression. Only 5 chicken eggs and 5 duck eggs were left. He did not know whether they could hatch into chicks or ducks. He covered them with hay, ready to take them back and hand them over to the other hens and ducks to hatch. Finally, there were 10 mallard eggs. There were no changes. These duck eggs were easy to handle and could hatch in the sun. There was no need for a female duck. Basically, this was the end of the invisible dragon's visit. Suddenly, List once again covered his chest. He felt that the mini-fire dragon living in his heart was going berserk once again. This time, no matter how he comforted it, it could not be suppressed. Roar! The emotions of the mini-fire dragon wantonly spread. It was a kind of complex emotion mixed with apprehension, excitement, fear, expectation, anxiety, urgency, and other emotions. Since I can't pacify it, then I will let you go berserk and prepare for a new life. List stopped suppressing it. In any case, the invisible dragon was gone, and it was very safe here. He might as well welcome the rebirth of the fire dragon. Just as he stopped suppressing it, he felt a strong suction coming from his heart. Just like the last time, the little fire dragon directly sucked up all his chi. Then, following the chi meridians, it quickly rushed to the palm of List's left hand, erupting chi as usual. The mini-fire dragon rushed out of his palm in the form of a flame. Roar! The voice no longer sounded in his mind but in his ears. The flame quickly condensed into a small fire dragon. This small fire dragon could already exist without List. It flapped its wings and slowly circled in front of List, constantly shouting roar and roar. It seemed to be eagerly looking forward to something. You want the fire dragon magic? List asked weakly. Without chi he was extremely uncomfortable, as if his body had been hollowed out, and indeed it was. Roar! The little fire dragon nodded like a human. Its IQ was definitely not low. But List sighed and said, I have fed you the last of my fire dragon magic this morning. Now, only the fire dragon brick factory and glass workshop still have a little fire dragon magic. I will take you there to get it. He struggled to stand up, ready to take the little fire dragon and set off for the port town. The little fire dragon was unwilling to leave. Roar! List guessed and asked, You want the fire dragon magic now? The little fire dragon hurriedly nodded, looking very anxious. Roar! Where can I get it for you now? You should take some medicine first. List took out a magic potion from the space gem, which he prepared for his daily training. He seemed to understand that the fire dragon magic could not be obtained. The little fire dragon rushed directly to List's palm, opened its mouth and ate all the magic potions in List's hand, along with the glass tube. After eating, it looked up at List again. Roar. More. List had no choice but to take out another magic potion. He took out 5 in a row and handed over all the magic potions he had used this month. The little fire dragon stretched out its flame tongue and licked its lips. The next moment, it flapped its wings and flew high. As it flew into the air, the congealed flames exploded with a loud bang, forming a rain of fire that filled the sky. When the dazzling rain of fire fell to the ground, a red fire dragon gradually emerged in the original position in the air. Its body was burning with flames, but the flames were gradually extinguished, and the color was getting closer and closer to black and red. Finally, the flames were completely extinguished, and a fire dragon covered with black and red scales flapped its wings, raised its head, and let out a loud dragon roar. Roar! The little fire dragon in the form of a fire seed was finally reborn and grew into a real body of flesh and blood. Chapter 522. This chapter is The Early Bookworm Has No Books to Read. Roar! 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 The little fire dragon flew excitedly in the sky. List sat on the ground, enduring the smell of smoked grass that had not yet dissipated. He took out the World of Warcraft meat and ate it crazily to supplement nutrition and accumulate a little chi. Crunch, crunch, crunch. A piece of magical beast meat with bones attached was chewed twice by him. He did not even taste it before he swallowed it directly into his stomach. List's mind was on the little fire dragon. This guy is so excited, I wonder if it will release its blood magic? He didn't delve too deeply into it. This thought was fleeting. Then he began to frown. A serious problem was noticed by him. Now that the little fire dragon is born, it has become flesh and blood. Although the body is not big, it is definitely not smaller than Loki. It is only half the size of the invisible dragon. It can't be hidden at all. A fire dragon with a body as big as a cow and even bigger when its wings are spread. List didn't know how to hide it. Exposure must not be exposed. Once exposed, he believed that within 3 days someone would start to have ideas about the fire dragon. Then, Sapphire Grand Duke would personally ride the Sapphire Dragon and descend on Black Horse Island. At that time he could either ride the little fire dragon, abandon his family business and wander the world, or he would have to obediently hand over the fire dragon. Even Black Horse Island would have to be handed over. After all, it was the place where the fire dragon was born. I won't choose either of these options. But the more important question is, what is my relationship with the little fire dragon now? List frowned. It was not impossible to hide. He could set a certain part of the territory as a restricted area, build walls and block roads. He could only enter and the little fire dragon could live happily inside. But the problem was, what was his relationship with the little fire dragon? How could he make the little fire dragon obedient and not run around? The World of Warcraft meat was full, and his chi slowly began to grow. Not only did his troubles not disappear, but they also accumulated deeper and deeper. Looking at the little fire dragon that was still rolling and roaring in the air, he had a conflicted expression. In the past, becoming a dragon knight was his biggest dream. Now he was not far from achieving his dream. However, the biggest difficulty was also placed in front of him at the same time. The little Charmander had 100 years of infancy. Even if the young dragon had combat power, it would definitely not be too strong. At the very least, it would not be a qualified dragon knight. Moreover, he was also doubtful whether Charmander would be willing to let him ride it, and whether it would turn hostile and fly away. 15 minutes later. The problem of falling out with List could be put aside. The little fire dragon, tired from flying, finally landed in front of List. Its body was completely revealed before List's eyes. Compared to the slender invisible dragon, the fire dragon's body was more robust, its lines revealing a rigid beauty. His muscles were well defined, but they did not seem out of place. It was always just right, and one could tell at a glance that it contained boundless power. The scales were fine, and the color was black with a hint of red. Some parts of the scales were darker, while others were redder. On its triangular head, there were 5 dragon horns symmetrically distributed. The dragon horn in the middle was straight and long, and the dragon horns on both sides were slightly curved. Its eyes had blood-red pupils. It looked a bit terrifying, but if one looked carefully, one could see the clarity and purity in its eyes. Roar! Charmander stood on the ground, its body much taller than List. It opened its mouth and called out softly as if it was greeting List. This kind of action and this kind of expression always made him feel that the one in front of him was not a dragon, but a child in dragon skin. Its eyes, tone, and demeanor revealed an aura of wisdom. List rubbed his face, making himself look a bit gentle, and looked at Charmander. Then he stretched out his hand and boldly touched Charmander's head. It felt a bit rough, and he felt that Charmander's scales were very hot. Charmander. I want to ride you, List said lightly. Charmander suddenly bared its teeth and made a fierce expression. With its already ferocious appearance, it was indeed very fierce. But its eyes betrayed that it was just bluffing, especially when it saw that List had begun to circle around it, trying to figure out how to ride it. There was even a look of panic in its eyes. Let me ride you for a while. Don't move. You have to know who nurtured you painstakingly, who fed you mouthful after mouthful of magic power. Charmander straightened its neck, bared its teeth, and remained unmoved. List quickly changed his strategy and his tone became enthusiastic. Charmander, we are partners who fight side by side. You and I fight together and we are the powerful Dragon Knight. Do you know that the Dragon Knight is the pinnacle of power in this world? No one can defeat the Dragon Knight. Roar. Do you understand? Very well, let me ride you. He turned over and was about to mount it. Charmander suddenly struggled and retreated 3 steps. It looked at List with vigilance, bared its teeth and continued to bare its teeth. Then it turned around and soared into the sky. Where are you going? Roar. Charmander flew to a certain height, directly folded its wings and like an arrow fell to the ground. It landed on the messy dining table, and then began to rummage through the food left by the invisible dragon. The cows tied to the stakes did not wake up. Charmander sniffed and gnawed on one of the calves. When List arrived, he saw Charmander eating beef and using its wings to fan away the smoke around it. It didn't like the smell of the smoke grass. List had a flash of inspiration. He walked to Charmander's side and said, Charmander, these cows are mine. I won't allow you to eat them. Charmander didn't even raise its head. Blood splashed from the corner of its mouth. Roar. If you eat my cow, then let me ride you. Roar. If you don't let me ride you, don't even think about eating beef in the future. Roar. If you let me ride you, I will feed you a cow every day. Roar. No matter what List said, Charmander was unwilling to let List ride it, which made List's resentment stifled in his chest. He used all the accumulated fire dragon magic to feed Charmander, but the result was that Charmander didn't even want to ride it. He could only stand aside and watch it eat the beef rudely. List also observed Charmander's back. There was a relatively flat area between the neck and the shoulder blade, and there seemed to be a whole bone under the scales. This made him think, this place should be the seat of the Dragon Knight. The flatness is very suitable for sitting, and the narrow grooves on both sides are just enough to fix the feet. Why does it feel like this part of the dragon's neck is simply for people to ride? Without any information about dragons, he basically had to guess about dragons. Charmander ate a whole cow, then burped and lazily licked the water jar with wine next to it. But after a lick, it quickly shook its head and flicked its tongue. It had no interest in wine. Charmander, are you going to let me ride you or not? Charmander's attitude was firm. List's face was gloomy. He wanted to teach Charmander a lesson, but he felt that he might not be able to beat it. Although Charmander was small, its body exuded a strong dragon's might, which was not much less oppressive than the invisible dragon. And under its body, there was always the feeling of a burning flame, like a volcano waiting to erupt. Perhaps this was the embodiment of the strength of an elemental dragon, the ultimate manifestation of the nature of magic, bringing incredible combat power. Very well, you are very stubborn. Let's talk about riding a dragon later. List tried to restrain his anger and patted its head, feeling the hot temperature. A thought suddenly flashed in his mind, will it burn my butt? The thought was fleeting and did not affect his topic. Your appearance brings not only flames but also danger. We are in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, and there is an adult sapphire dragon that will not allow you to exist. So, you need to hide according to my instructions. He tilted the dragon's head. It didn't seem to understand, but it seemed to understand. Next, List explained his ideas in detail. He intended to place Charmander on Seagull Island, north of Black Horse Island, so that no one could know of the existence of Charmander. He also planned to let Ichi get to know Charmander, help him take care of Charmander, provide food for Charmander, and restrain Charmander from running around. Among all of them, List trusted Siren Ichi the most. However, his long speech was not yet finished. Charmander suddenly roared. Then its body quickly turned into a flame and crashed into the unsuspecting List. List did not respond. There seemed to be a loud bang in his ears. The flame of Charmander rushed into his body and disappeared. No, it didn't disappear. Instead, it turned into a mass of magic and gathered in his chest. He was shocked and quickly took off his coat and leather armor, and unbuttoned his inner shirt. He lowered his head and looked at his chest. There was no chest hair on his chest. His originally snow-white and clean skin was now covered in flame patterns, forming a vivid and lifelike image of a soaring fire dragon. What's more, this fire dragon pattern could still move. Chapter 523. The little fire dragon can actually live in my body? List was completely stunned. The magic of the dragon once again refreshed his understanding. A dragon of flesh and blood could even switch between flesh and magic at will. The fire dragon pattern extended from his collarbone down to his abdomen and ribs on both sides, and kept changing at any time. Sometimes it would flap its wings and fly, sometimes it would shrink its wings as if lying down, and sometimes it would start to walk on his chest. It would even hang upside down on his chest. List could feel it and could even continue his previous cultivation method. The little fire dragon could still refine his new chi and then excrete magic impurities, helping his chi evolve into a dragon chi. Perhaps this was the real cultivation method of the Dragon Knight. The little fire dragon living on his chest looked very proud. Its emotions had re-established a connection with List, and he could vaguely sense it. It was probably laughing at List for worrying about nothing. However, List ignored the little fire dragon's clamor. Now that the risk of exposure has basically been removed, there was only the problem of riding the dragon. With his experience in domesticating blizzard beasts and chocobos, it would not be a difficult task to deal with a newborn dragon. He put on his clothes and silently released emotional communication to the little fire dragon in his heart. Just stay on my chest and tell me in advance when you want to come out for air. I will take you to a place where there is no one. In addition, inform me in advance when you want to suck my chi in the future. Being hollowed out twice in a row made List quite angry. Roar. The little fire dragon reluctantly agreed. Although it was very resistant to List riding it, it was not an unreasonable beast, but more like an intelligent creature that knew how to think. Feeling that it was still vaguely releasing dragon might, List added, in addition, don't release dragon might casually, put it away. Brr. The little fire dragon was a little unhappy. It liked to release dragon might, which was a symbol of its majesty as a dragon. However, knowing that releasing dragon might would expose itself, it seriously restrained itself and no longer leaked a trace. Then he yawned and lay on his chest, snoring loudly. He touched his warm chest. List stood where he was and spent 3 minutes going through everything that had happened this morning to make sure that he didn't miss anything. Only then did he summon the smoke mission and summarize today's harvest. Mission completed. Reward, Fire Dragon's new life. Mission, the long-awaited Fire Dragon has been obtained. From now on, you need to work hard to raise the Fire Dragon. It will eat a lot, so work hard and save up to become a qualified Fire Dragon breeder. Please complete this year's spring plowing and not let the fields go to waste. Reward, 22 Dragon-type pigs. Seeing the contents of the new mission, he clenched his fists in excitement. Sure enough, I succeeded. The invisible dragon's bloodline-infected magic power has already created a new dragon species for me, Dragon Pig. From now on, eating normal pork can provide a lot of nutrition and save on the consumption of meat in World of Warcraft. 22 Dragon-type pigs. According to the standard of about 10 pigs per litter, these 2 piglets could become dragon pigs. If they were paired with each other, they would soon be able to breed a large number of dragon-type pigs. If they were to be mixed with normal pigs, they might even be able to breed a large number of hybrid pigs with dragon bloodline. In fact, they were all dragon-type pigs, just that the thinness of the bloodline was different and the quality would be different. In the future, I need to mark the bloodline of the dragon species and carry out a detailed classification according to the dilution and mixing of the bloodline. I might as well issue a bloodline certificate. List thought. On Earth, in order to ensure the bloodline of pet cats and dogs, there would be a special organization to issue a bloodline certificate. It would record the health and training results of cats and dogs, as well as 3 generations of ancestors. He was going to imitate this method and establish a file for the dragon species in the territory, issue a bloodline certificate, and record in detail every detail of every dragon-type horse, dragon-type cow, dragon-type pig, and possibly dragon-type chickens, ducks and mallards, breeding, mating and blood relations. Only in this way could he ensure that the dragon bloodline would last for a long time. It would not be diluted by the ordinary bloodline and eventually degenerate from a dragon to an ordinary creature. He had accumulated a lot of qi. After carefully removing the footprints of the invisible dragon and the fire dragon, List suddenly soared 100 meters into the sky and flew towards Green Tea Town in the distance. The Sky Knight used qi to hurry on his journey. It could be said to be super fast, but it could not last long. Flying high in the sky consumed a lot of qi. However, a short journey was still possible. Green Tea Town had not yet been built. At present, the land had only been leveled and a few streets and residential areas had been planned. However, at this time, a surf team, officials and knight were waiting here. "Sir, have you finished your training?" Gort took the lead to greet him. "Yes." List had no expression on his face, but he was actually a little embarrassed inside. The so-called training excuse was really not a rigorous excuse, especially when he had prepared a lot of food, smoked grass, pregnant cows, pigs, chickens, ducks and eggs. However, none of his followers dared to question him. After a pause, he continued, "Take some people to tidy up my training place. Take away the smoked grass and food. As for the cows and pigs, be careful and send them back. Don't let them get hurt. Also, take away the eggs, duck eggs and mallard eggs carefully and continue to incubate them." "Yes, sir." Consultant Gort, "This batch of cattle, pigs and eggs are all breeds that I've improved using special methods. Every one of them is extremely valuable. I ask you to treat them carefully. Be precise to the point that every breeding has to be recorded. Then select the best breeds and pair them up to form an industry." "As you wish, sir." After some thought, he was still worried. "How about this? Let's build a cattle farm in Horse Town to raise the 3 pregnant cows. Let's build a pig farm in Grain Town to raise the 2 pregnant pigs. If the eggs and duck eggs hatch, we'll also build a chicken farm and duck farm in Red River Town. There's also a separate green caterpillar mallard breeding garden." Horse Town was adjacent to the high-quality Black Horse Ranch, which was very suitable for raising cattle. Grain Town was flat and suitable for growing grain, which was a source of food for pigs. Red River Town's Red River Estuary Mangrove had bred a large number of green caterpillars, which were excellent fodder for raising chickens and ducks. Everything was arranged properly. It was already noon. After lunch, List gathered all the officials for this year's spring plowing meeting. March is coming, the weather is getting warmer, and spring plowing is about to begin. Some crops have already started to prepare for spring plowing. Advisor Gort, you will host this meeting and arrange spring plowing matters. Although Gort hosted the meeting, everything was under List's control. He arranged the core content of spring plowing according to the requirements of the smoke mission. Don't let the farmland go to waste. Make sure that every piece of farmland is sown with seeds, especially beans and corn seeds. Plant as much as you can. Corn could be planted without any management. As long as it could survive, there would be more or less a harvest. Leguminous plants were planted to grow rhizobia. Fungus peas had not been bred in large quantities, so they could not be counted on to produce rhizobia for the time being. All officials must participate in this year's spring plowing to accumulate experience. The newly built town needs a large number of officials. Whether you can get the position of chief official or not will depend on your performance this time. At the end of the meeting, List threw out the biggest bait and immediately made the officials restless. Chapter 524. What is this? Corn. What sprite is in corn? Mickey. On the stones used to divide the fields, a group of serfs in patched clothes gathered together, drinking water, eating bread, and dipping in peanut butter. Mark, a clerk without patches, was holding a stick, pointing to the corn seeds on the ground and asking the group of serfs. It was field teaching time. Since most of the new serfs came from the Eagle Kingdom, they could only speak Wind and not Serpentine. In order to increase the sense of belonging and ease of communication, the Lord stipulated that the official language of the territory was Serpentine. Everyone must learn Serpentine for daily communication. Only the night class needed to learn Serpentine and Wind at the same time. Mark's Wind was not good, he only knew a few words and learned them from Monsieur Grandet. In fact, his Serpentine was not very good, he could only read and speak, not write. However, he only needed to teach the serfs daily language and his level was barely enough. It was spring plowing season. The serfs could not have a fixed time to learn Serpentine, so Monsieur Grandet proposed to the Lord to use the serfs' rest time to arrange reasonable teaching. The Lord agreed, and the clerks in charge of teaching needed to rush to the fields every day and go to the fields with the serfs. Many clerks sighed. It was not easy to get into the administrative office, but they still could not leave the mud. But Mark did not complain. Because he was ambitious. You have to remember, Mickey, this is the Lord's third sprite, the corn sprite. Mark shouted loudly, otherwise the serfs would not pay attention and listen to what he was saying. Now tell me, what is the Lord's name? Tulip. Black Horse Island. Sky Knight. The son of the great Tulip family, the Viscount of Black Horse Island who rules everything, Sky Knight list Tulip. The serfs skillfully shouted the standard serpentine. This was the serpentine they were taught when they first came to Black Horse Island. At that time there was no Sky Knight. Later, after learning that List was promoted, the officials immediately added the title to the Lord's name. Without a doubt, this kind of teaching method was crude, inferior, simple, and lousy brainwashing. Every day the serfs would be taught these slogans by the clerks. Repeating it once or twice might not have any effect and might even arouse disgust. But after thousands of times, these contents would be deeply engraved in everyone's mind, leaving no room for doubt. In fact, List wasn't very keen on this kind of advertising method. He knew that strength was the most important factor in ensuring the territory's loyalty. However, if the officials were willing to use this kind of method to curry favor and brainwash the people, he had no reason to stop them. After all, he couldn't shake his own rule. As a modern person, he was well aware of the importance of public opinion, commonly known as the construction of spiritual civilization. Seeing the serfs shouting in unison, Mark was very satisfied. This was the result of his teaching during this time. He was assigned to a farmland area in Grain Town and was responsible for teaching the serfs who farmed in this farmland. Compared to the other clerks who played tricks, he treated every teaching time seriously. He didn't even let go of mealtime. At this time he saw that the serfs he was teaching were obviously better than the serfs taught by others. Their snake pronunciation was more standard and they had more snake vocabulary. He was looking forward to it. The Lord will commend the officials who work hard during the spring plowing. I will definitely be rewarded for my hard work. After the spring plowing, I will definitely be promoted from an ordinary clerk to a cultural clerk. Maybe I will be valued by a supervisor and be directly chosen as an assistant. The official system of Black Horse Island was a new system after List's reform. It generally followed the previous administrative system, but it was more subdivided and clear. Compared to the past, there were only a few supervisors, plus a group of clerks, and a chaotic and crude system. The current official system was very clear. Take the town's administrative office as an example. The lowest level was similar to the clerks in the establishment, responsible for all kinds of errands and miscellaneous work. The next level was the department clerk, with a formal establishment, mainly responsible for the specific affairs of the various departments. The next level was equivalent to the assistant in charge of the official. These three levels all belonged to the official class. The real official was the town's department head, also known as the administrative officer. According to the different development directions of each town, the number and functions of administrative officers were also different. Administrative officers roughly included administrative officers, financial officers, defense officers, legal officers, cultural officers, and diplomats. These were the permanent administrative officers of other lords' territories. On Black Horse Island, there were additional administrative officers such as insect officers, maritime officers, traffic officers, construction officers, and fishing officers. All administrative officers were responsible to the town's advisor. However, after the port town was upgraded to a port city in the future, a set of city officials would be formed to manage all the towns. The city's administrative officer and the town's advisor would be the dual leader of the town's administrative officer. To avoid the formation of an advisor's word and balance the power of officials, Mark did not dare to expect to become an administrative officer. After all, the requirement for an administrative officer was to be a trainee knight. He was just a civilian who had not practiced qi. His greatest wish was to become an administrative officer's assistant and then marry a beautiful wife. Just as he was fantasizing about his success and fame while teaching snake language, a group of people suddenly came on a field path in the distance, riding horses. When he got closer, Mark suddenly discovered that it was Mr. Grandet, the port town's cultural officer who was deeply valued by the Lord and led the teaching of snake language and wind language in the territory. He hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Clerk Mark greets Sir Cultural Officer. Mark, I remember you. You were very serious in my classes. Grandet dismounted from his horse and looked carefully, seemingly recognizing Mark. Mark suddenly trembled with excitement. It is an honor to be remembered by Sir Cultural Officer. Grandet nodded. In fact, he didn't remember who Mark was. When Black Horse Island was built, the administrative office urgently recruited a large number of clerks for pre-job training. There were hundreds of them. I am here to check the progress of your clerks' teaching. Mark, get all the civilians ready. Yes, Sir Cultural Officer. Spring plowing work was arranged. List didn't pay much attention to it. He rushed back to Flower Town the next day. Since all the potions had been eaten up by Charmander, he had to use the Tulip Castle channel to buy a batch again. This would cost him thousands of gold coins. What was even more depressing was that Charmander obviously would not be sent away so easily. It woke up on his chest and howled for food and drink. If it wants to grow, it has to consume more resources. Potions are just one of them. Even if it costs thousands of gold coins a month for potions, it would not be enough. Moreover, as a Sky Knight, List took potions and ate meat every day for a lot of money. It is too difficult to rely solely on the output of Black Horse Island. If it weren't for the huge profits of liquor and glass, I might not even be able to support my own cultivation. I really hope that the development order will come earlier. I want to make achievements as soon as possible and plunder more spoils to subsidize consumption. Chapter 525. This chapter is titled Book Friend 201807241749439994 and will be updated with additional chapters. The lifespan of a dragon is 1,000 years. This is a recognized data. As for whether it is credible or not, List has no way to distinguish between true and false. He can only believe that this is true information. Before the age of 100, it is a young dragon. From 100 to 800 years old, it is an adult dragon. After 800 years old, it is an old dragon. The old dragon will leave the living area and fly to the Dragon Valley. What he can distinguish now is that dragons do not necessarily die in the Dragon Valley. Evil dragons may be killed by dragon slayers. The fire dragon of Black Horse Island belongs to the evil dragon category. His death is very strange. It may not necessarily die of old age, but it may be killed. Even if the dragon dies, it seems that it can be resurrected. His life is like a reincarnation. It really costs a lot of money to raise a dragon, but what I am wondering now is, what do those evil dragons that are not raised eat when they are young? List was very puzzled. He asked the little fire dragon, but obviously there was no answer. The little fire dragon was very smart, but it only knew to eat and not to be ridden. In the Maple Mountain of the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf, there is a light dragon. When did the light dragon come to the Maple Mountain, and what did it eat to grow up and become an adult dragon that cannot be eradicated? Even the people of the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf did not know. There are also some places that seem to be inhabited by evil dragons, and occasionally invade human towns. In the description of the night novel, the dragon will rob human wealth, eat people, and eat livestock. However, there is no author to describe where these dragons come from. They are usually the protagonist, the righteous knight, passing through a place and hearing people being threatened by the dragon, or the nobles being threatened by the dragon. Then the protagonist will help and eradicate the dragon. In the end, he will return with the beauty. The dragon manual that Marquis Bull often read did not record the situation of the young dragon. It seems that the young dragon is a vacuum. The dragons that humans come into contact with are all adult dragons, and the dragons that are raised by various countries are also adult dragons. It seems that the Dragon Knight is riding an adult dragon. There must be a Dragon Knight who found a young dragon, established a companion relationship, and successfully rode the dragon. But for some reason they chose to hide the information of the young dragon. List looked at the clear flame pattern on his chest in the mirror and frowned. Maybe they have the same idea as me? He did not dare to reveal that he had a young dragon. The other Dragon Knight might not have dared to expose themselves when they were still young, but why would they choose not to expose themselves when they were young even after they had reached adulthood? Perhaps, it's not that no one leaked the information, but that the dragon's information was hidden by the dragon-rearing family? After all, the families with dragons would not want their dragons to fall into the hands of the families without dragons. They would definitely want to monopolize the dragons in this world. The little fire dragon in the mirror yawned and began to roar again. It was hungry. List ignored it. This little fire dragon's digestive ability was too strong. In the past few days he had secretly fed it more than a dozen cows. However, a cow could only keep it full for 4 hours. 4 hours later, it cried out that it was hungry. Sometimes it would wake List up in the middle of the night and ask for beef. Gradually, List found that it was fine even if he did not feed it for half a day. so he consciously controlled the little fire dragon's eating time. Unfortunately, he could control the eating of cows, but he could not stop it from taking potions. Every day it had to take 5 times the potions that List used for training. If it was not given, it could cry out for a whole day. List could not afford such a consumption. After he advanced to Sky Knight, even if the dragon's fighting energy dissipated slowly, coupled with the reduction of the aura decay, he still needed a lot of potions. He and the little fire dragon together were equivalent to 6 Sky Knights taking potions together. Even an ordinary marquis family could not easily provide 6 Sky Knights taking potions together. Moreover, List was only a viscount, and the construction of his territory had just begun. He could not think of how to satisfy the consumption of so many potions. He also did not know what the little fire dragon ate in the wild. Since he could not increase his income, he could only reduce it. After thinking about it, he still had to control the little fire dragon's appetite. He could provide it with some cheap meat to reduce its dependence on potions. Maybe the little fire dragon will be malnourished. He laughed self-deprecatingly. But what can I do? Its knight is ready to change his name to List Jones. Jones was so poor. His conscience was a little uneasy. Fortunately, he knew how to comfort himself. Anyway, it won't let me ride it, why should I feed it? Hee. After adjusting his emotions, he appeased the little fire dragon's cries and put on his clothes. He walked to the window and looked at the apple tree that was sprouting new buds. No one knew what he was thinking. Dang dang dang. There was a knock on the door. Butler Carter's voice came from outside the door. Master. List did not turn his head and simply replied, Please come in. When Carter walked in, he asked again, Is Mrs. Morrison better? Her fever has subsided after taking the snake blood fruit potion. She has just fallen asleep, Carter replied. Just a while ago Mrs. Morrison might have caught a cold and had a fever, and the local doctors couldn't treat her. In the end, it was List who made the decision to make the snake blood fruit potion according to the snake blood fruit recipe recorded in the book, Classification of Herbs by Arish Truth. After giving it to Mrs. Morrison, her condition quickly began to improve. The snake blood fruit could not only treat snake venom, but it was also recorded in the book, Classification of Herbs by Arish Truth, that it could treat many common diseases. The 4 snake blood fruit insects that he had obtained from killing the 6-headed sea snake king and irrigating them with snake blood seemed to be very useful. When made into a commonly used potion, it could save the lives of many sick serfs. The death rate of serfs in this world was not low, and most of them died because of illness. Once the production cost of the snake blood fruit potion was reduced, it would definitely become a profitable industry. However, commoners could not afford the high cost of the potion, and List's conscience did not allow him to sell the potion at a high price. It was enough for him to make a little profit on the cost and not waste the snake blood fruit insects. Mr. Carter, tell Mrs. Morrison to rest in peace. She doesn't need to continue working on the castle. The most important thing for her now is to recuperate. Carter said with a smile, Master, I'm afraid that what Mrs. Morrison is most worried about is not being able to continue making milk tea for you. Indeed, the milk tea brewed by Maggie is still a little lacking. It's not as delicate and uniform as the milk tea brewed by Mrs. Morrison. The fragrance of the black tea fruit and the fragrance of the milk perfectly blend, List said with a slight exaggeration. In fact, he was just used to drinking the milk tea brewed by Mrs. Morrison. Milk tea was simple, it was just a mixture of milk and black tea tree capsules, but the brewing time, temperature and ratio all affected the final taste. After talking about Mrs. Morrison, Carter began to report his purpose of knocking on the door. March 9th is your birthday, Master. Now that you are a Sky Knight and rule everything in Black Horse Island and Flower Town, your birthday celebration needs to be of a higher standard than last year. I came to ask you, Master, how to grasp the degree of grandeur. Well, Mr. Carter, you decide. List said with a smile. His mind was now on the little fire dragon, and he had no expectations for his birthday. Besides, Chapter 526. The castle was already busy preparing for List's birthday celebration. In recent days, List did not have much to do except worry about how to raise the little fire dragon. So much so that he put more energy into the glass greenhouse. The 1/3 germination rate of the potion seeds had grown strong. The growth rate was a little slow, but it was still healthy. The shipwood was also growing strong but also slowly. It was reasonable to say that the growth rate was the fastest at the sprout stage, but it was almost invisible on the potion seeds and the shipwood. Watering and fertilizing them. He had great expectations for these potion seeds. If they could all grow into potions, it would definitely be a huge fortune. Now what List lacked the most was potions. Not only did he not have the money to buy potions, but he also did not have the channels to buy enough potions. Potions were a product that all nobles needed, and there were not many available for sale. For example, the potions produced in List's own territory, even the black tulip, had been taken back for List's own use. He had never sold a potion to outsiders. I really hope I can sell a space gem in exchange for countless wealth to support me and the little fire dragon. He touched the 4 space gems hanging on his chest and thought to himself. Of these 4 space gems, 3 were already full, and only 1 was a regular space that needed to be filled at any time. The 3 full gems were mainly used to transfer books, mithril, blue iron, plastic aluminum, potion seeds, shipwood, jade, crystal, World of Warcraft meat, dragon milk, etc. In the past, a space gem could not be stored, but now it could be stored. Of course, he would not expose his wealth. There was always a feeling of insecurity in the warehouse. For gem spaces the size of a fingernail had been made into a necklace, embedded in the line of the sapphire pendant. If one did not look carefully, it would give the impression of a crystal. Usually, on a gem pendant, for the sake of beauty, a few brightly colored crystals would be embellished. In this way, the pendant on his neck, in the eyes of others, was just a piece of gem equipment. For a Sky Knight, it was inconceivable that he did not have gem equipment. It was normal to have one. And no one would have the idea of attacking a Sky Knight just for a gem. Therefore, the possibility of these 4 space gems being exposed was very small and very safe. Actually, the biggest hidden danger was when it was used. Especially when he took out things that shouldn't have appeared from time to time. As time went on, it would inevitably arouse the suspicion of others. Of course, he didn't need to worry too much about this. Firstly, he was a lord and a Sky Knight, so his followers wouldn't dare to question him. Secondly, very few people knew about the legend of the invisible dragon, and even fewer knew about the space gem. Even if someone suspected it, they wouldn't necessarily associate it with a legendary item like the space gem. The concept of an independent dimension did not exist in their minds at all. List soon sighed. It's better to use it as little as possible. No matter how small the risk is, it's still a risk. Once the space gem is exposed, the secret of the invisible dragon can no longer be hidden. Charmander admittedly has great potential in the future, but I still have ambitions for the invisible dragon. He was not an optimistic person by nature, so when he encountered something worrying, the number of times he sighed increased. At the same time, he was greedy and insatiable. The little fire dragon was about to die, but he was still thinking about when to ride the invisible dragon. He wondered if the invisible dragon liked to soak in the stench of the smoke grass. Would he faint halfway through riding it? At present, I still don't have the ability to raise a dragon. However, that doesn't mean that I won't be able to in the future. My goal is to find a dragon to contract with and become the lord of the dragon field, and then raise a dragon to ride. It would be best if I can contract with a fairy dragon that represents life. If I can successfully contract with it, then maybe I can also have eternal life. Dragons were creatures with infinite charm. Naturally, the more the better. Feeling the warmth of the little fire dragon on his chest, a thought suddenly emerged in his mind. I really want to kill my way to the Blue Dragon Island and snatch the Grand Duke's Sapphire Dragon. Also, I have to get my hands on the Dragon Knight Chi secret manual. The sapphire that can increase strength is priceless. Fantasy could only temper spirit power. It was of no benefit to reality. After eating lunch, List still had to leave the flower town obediently. He went to the uninhabited wasteland west of the town and released the little fire dragon. He let it fly freely on the seashore for a while. It could switch between its physical body and magic power at will, but it still yearned to fly freely. The little fire dragon's cry drifted on the sea. Next to List, the chocobo Loki shivered. Under List's command, it no longer ran away when it saw the little fire dragon. However, due to the suppression of its bloodline instinct, it was still deeply afraid of the little fire dragon's dragon might. In fact, it was much better now. Previously, every time the little fire dragon was released, it would be scared shitless. Feel the little fire dragon's dragon might. I hope you can become the first animal not to be afraid of dragon might. Although he could not ride the little fire dragon, Loki was still his exclusive mount. At this moment, the little fire dragon folded its wings and plunged into the sea. Then it began to scream roar, roar, flapping its wings and struggling on the surface of the sea. It could not swim. This useless dragon. List quickly took out a rope and wrapped it around the little fire dragon's wings. He then pulled the little fire dragon ashore from the sea. This set of movements was very skillful. It was obviously not the first time he used it. The reason was very simple. Every time the little fire dragon was at the seashore, it wanted to conquer the sea and become a fire dragon that could swim. However, when it came to swimming, it was really useless. Even though Liszt had taught it many times, it still panicked when it entered the water. If not for Liszt, it would have been the first dragon to drown. Roar! Lying on the shore and coughing water, the little fire dragon roared weakly. Half of it was a little dizzy from choking water, and the other half was dizzy from hunger. Liszt took the opportunity to constantly stroke it with his hands to improve their relationship. You useless dragon, do you know that you are a fire dragon? Why does a fire dragon learn to swim? You should go into a volcano and soak in the lava. Volcano? Lava? Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and thought of an important question. The power of an elemental dragon was clearly a manifestation of the extreme nature of magic. The magic of a fire dragon was the manifestation of fire energy at its peak. It could change the environment between heaven and earth and constantly create volcanic eruptions. The magic of a wind dragon could constantly create storms. Based on this line of thought, does this mean that where there are storms, there will be extreme wind magic? And where volcanoes erupt, will there be extreme fire attribute magic power? If I throw the little fire dragon into the lava, will it be able to grow quickly? He remembered the description in the knight's novel. The fire dragon always lived in volcanoes, the ice dragon in a world of ice and snow, the water dragon in the sea, the earth dragon in a desert, the wind dragon's nest all year round, and the thunder dragon always appeared at night when there were thunderstorms. The appearance of the light dragon was accompanied by all kinds of illusions, and the appearance of the dark dragon was pitch black. Of course, this was the fantasy of those down-and-out aristocrat writers, but it was also natural common sense. It was very likely that the fire dragon lived in volcanoes. Chapter 527. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire has many volcanoes, such as the very large islands Blue Dragon Island and Iron Hoof Island, which have active volcanoes. Even Coral Island has a volcano, but it is an extinct volcano, located between Birch City and North Valley City. Liszt has also explored there. Even Black Horse Island, in his speculation, is also an extinct volcano. Should the little fire dragon be kept in a volcano? He frowned. There is no problem with the logic that the fire dragon hid in a volcano when it was a child. It is even possible that the young fire dragon does not need to eat food and can directly bathe in magma. This is a magical creature formed by magic, and it is difficult to imagine how it will survive. Liszt looked at the little fire dragon that has recovered and flew into the sky again. Maybe without the support of a volcano, the little fire dragon needs to eat ordinary blood and magic potions to provide the nutrients needed for development, but I can't raise it in a volcano. The active volcanoes in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire are in the territories of other nobles. Other extinct and dormant volcanoes have little access to magma, and naturally do not breed the magic needed by the fire dragon. Should I quietly send the little fire dragon into the volcano and let it soak in the magma? The idea flashed through his mind and was quickly rejected by him. If the little fire dragon's trail is exposed, it will be very troublesome, and whether the volcano can help the little fire dragon grow is not certain. It is best to find an island like Hawaii in the sea. There is a Hawaiian Volcanoes National Park on the island of Hawaii. There are two active volcanoes, Maunaroi and Kilauea. Kilauea is the most active volcano in the world and has not stopped erupting since 1983. Magma erupts from the volcano almost every day, and it is the best place to watch the volcano erupt. Unfortunately, finding the Hawaiian island of this world was no less difficult than finding another fire dragon. After all, even if you found an active volcano, you might not be able to see magma. The magma was hidden inside the volcano. Only volcanoes like Kilauea, which were constantly erupting, could easily come into contact with magma. He shook his head. He put away the rope and said excitedly, "Anyway, at least I thought of a way to cultivate the little fire dragon. Wait for me to slowly investigate and find an island with a volcano in the azure wave sea. When the time comes, I'll be promoted to the title of nobility and I'll ask for an island with a volcano." Viscount was promoted to count. The island would definitely need to be expanded so they could choose a new big island to build on. If they didn't mind the trouble, they could also choose to stack many small islands on top of each other. Just as Liszt was struggling through his days, another piece of bad news was sent to him. It was from the manager of the chicken farm. The manager was an expert in raising chickens for many years. He discovered that the 5 eggs that List had sent over had already died and could no longer be hatched into chicks. Are you sure they are dead? In the Flower Town's chicken farm, List stared at the chicken farm steward with an unsightly expression. Trembling with fear, the steward reported, "Sir Lord, these eggs are really dead. I took them under the sun to look at them, their color is very dark and red, and they have already given off a foul smell." Accompanying the steward was the administrative officer Isaiah, who added, "Sir, old Wuxia is the person who knows the most about eggs in the chicken farm. He can tell at a glance whether the eggs are dead or alive. He is the one who arranges for the hens to hold their nests in the chicken farm, so his judgment is basically never wrong." Taking a deep breath, List said lightly, "I see these eggs, throw them away." "Yes, sir." "Isaiah, go to the duck farm again, I want to know if the duck eggs are also dead. In addition, send someone to check the 10 mallard eggs to see if they are dead." Accepting the reality, he immediately thought of 2 kinds of duck eggs. The report from the duck farm came quickly. Indeed, like the chicken farm, the duck eggs were dead, but the duck farm steward was not sure and let the ducks continue to hatch. One day later, there was also news from Black Horse Island. No one was sure if the 10 mallard eggs were dead, but one of the eggs had turned black and seemed to have deteriorated. Basically, this batch of eggs infected by the dragon's blood and magic were all dead. List was in a bad mood after all the hard work turned into nothing. Originally, he was hoping to get dragon chickens, ducks, and mallard ducks to supplement nutrition and improve the food conditions of the territory. Now he could only count on the dragon cows and pigs. "Master, maybe those duck eggs are just dead and the rest of the eggs may be able to hatch into ducklings." Butler Carter saw that List was in a bad mood and comforted him. "I know very well that those eggs and duck eggs are all dead." List smiled slightly as if he was not affected. "Don't worry about me, this is just an unplanned change. Scientific experiments will certainly not be smooth sailing. This time the improvement of the breed failed, next time I will adjust again, I will get the results I want." He was very sure that the eggs and duck eggs were all dead. The reason was simple. The reward for the latest smoke mission was 22 dragon pigs, not dragon chickens and dragon ducks. According to the incubation time, eggs only need 21 days, and duck eggs only need 28 days, much shorter than the gestation period of a sow. The reward of the smoke mission should be eggs and duck eggs at the top. After all, they were dragon creatures, worthy of being the reward of the smoke mission. They did not appear, but the dragon pigs appeared. It could be seen that the dragon chickens and ducks were not successfully infected at all. They may have been killed on the spot by the firebird. He was now thinking about another question. Poultry such as chickens, ducks, and geese are probably too weak to withstand the firebird or the dragon's blood infection. Mallard ducks are supposed to be World of Warcraft, but I didn't expect them to be unable to withstand it. What? Could it be that eggs, as living individuals, can't accept the dragon's blood? So he thought. To get a poultry dragon creature, the direction of infection should not be set on eggs, but on hens, ducks, and geese. Ordinary chickens, ducks, and geese were probably not possible. Chocobo Loki is also a type of bird. Its existence means that birds can be infected with the bloodline of dragons, and it was originally just a low-level draconic beast, a draconic beast that was infected from a low-level magical beast. From this, it can be seen that a low-level World of Warcraft mallard has the potential to be infected. Next time I should bring a female mallard duck to be infected. As an old friend of the invisible dragon and a knight of Charmander, List was confident that he would have many opportunities to get a dragon creature in the future. Therefore, regarding the death of the eggs and duck eggs, he was only depressed for a moment before returning to normal. And time passed by unknowingly. Quickly entered March and quickly went to March 9th, ushering in his 18th birthday. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was considered an adult at the age of 16, and the age of 18 was just an ordinary birthday. But for the transmigrator List, the age of 18 meant the date of adulthood in his hometown. The sun rose in the east. Holding the milk tea personally brewed by Mrs. Morrison after her recovery, List stood under the apple tree and looked at the tender alfalfa on the grass around the castle. Chapter 528. This chapter is Little Maid, 10,000 rewards. Happy birthday, List. Happy birthday, List. Thank you, Levis Relia, thank you for the gifts. Happy birthday, List. Thank you, Ulvera. At 10:30 in the morning, a group of carriages arrived. It was all the members of the Tulip family, including Madame Penelope, who was not very healthy. It was to celebrate List's birthday. My young man, you have grown up by 1 year. Even so, you are still the youngest Sky Knight of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Madame Penelope smiled and hugged her grandson. Today List was her proudest grandson, enjoying unusual and kind treatment. However, her caretakers and servants were holding potted plants and handing them to List's servants. No matter how proud they were, they still gave potted plants as gifts. List smiled and had the servants move the potted plants to the flower bed. He was no longer looking forward to getting more sprite worms from Madame Penelope. How could a small balcony give birth to so many sprite worms? However, out of habit, he still quickly released magic eyes and swept the somewhat strange potted plant. Just now, Madame Penelope had introduced it as a green ingot, a leguminous plant. As for why it was called green ingot, one could understand the meaning of its name by looking at the 2 egg-sized green seed beans that resembled ingots on the roots of the flower pot. These were the seeds of the green ingot. After germinating and splitting, part of them extended downward into the roots, while the other part grew upward into the trunk. This tree was classified as a tree and could grow up to 4 meters tall. Its young sapling, because of its 2 large seed beans, was not absorbed after germinating like ordinary seeds. Instead, it turned into a leaf-like shape and continued to photosynthesize. It was very ornamental, and many people chose to plant it as a potted plant. Its fruit was a pod called a green ingot, which could be roasted and eaten. It tasted mediocre, like an inferior version of a potato. However, with just a glance. Suddenly, a dim mana retroaction light was discovered by List, condensing on the bean on its left. Wait. He immediately called out to stop the servant from moving the green ingot away. Instead, he carefully observed it and confirmed that there was indeed a radiance in the bean, which was a sign that a sprite worm was about to be born. What is it, List? Madame Penelope seemed to realize something and came over. What's wrong with my potted plant? List smiled and did not choose to conceal it. Instead, he said happily, Grandmother, my dear grandmother, if I am not mistaken, this green ingot is likely to have already given birth to a sprite worm. I don't know how to thank you, but this is the 3rd sprite worm you gave me. What? Madame Penelope exclaimed, it really has a sprite worm? Listening to her tone, it was clear that she did not believe that her potted plant would continue to breed sprite worms. She probably did not think so when she sent the potted plant. After so many years of life experience, she had long since learned how to be meticulous and save some gift money by borrowing the previous 2 sprite worms as a gimmick. However, at this moment, no one cared about her tone. The Count and his wife, Levis and his wife, Elvira Lytton, as well as other aristocrats, all came over to take a look. The Count said, List, you are not mistaken, are you? Is this really a sprite worm stock that breeds sprite worms? Father, I am very sensitive to magic power. I can feel the magic power of a sprite worm from the green ingot. There is no mistaking it. The problem lies in whether or not it can be cultivated. However, I have some experience in cultivating sprite worms. So far, none of the sprite worms I have discovered have been lost. Heavens! Madame Marie covered her mouth in disbelief. She was not surprised by a sprite worm, but because it belonged to List and was bred by Madame Penelope's potted plant. Sir Viscount List is indeed a son of glory. An aristocrat immediately started flattering him. My dear brother, why does the glory of night always favor you? Grandmother's potted plant has already given birth to 3 sprite worms, all of which were gifted to you. Elvira said enviously. List smiled again. You should sigh with emotion as to why grandmother's potted plant always gives birth to sprite worms. The glory of night also favors grandmother. Madame Penelope laughed heartily, no longer as reserved as before. Although I am just an old woman, the glory of night has not abandoned me. You guys, you always thought that I was fooling you with my potted plant. How could you know that my potted plant is a treasure? The green ingot worm was solemnly carried to the flower bed. However, the compliments did not stop. The aristocrats were still tirelessly discussing how List was favored by the glory of night, while the family members also continuously congratulated List. The green ingot worm, which had yet to be born, served as a foil to the birthday celebration. Listening to everyone's compliments, List felt an indescribable sense of superiority in his heart. It was just a small sprite worm, yet it made the other aristocrats endlessly envious. If they knew that there was a small fireworm sleeping on his chest, wouldn't they be so envious that they would roll on the ground? Although it could not be ridden, it would only reach adulthood after 100 years. But the small fireworm could still continuously help him upgrade his dragon's battle chi, and its strength continued to increase. He was now sure that, with the small fireworm's refinement and output during this period of time, his dragon's battle chi had already surpassed that of the perfection-level Sky Knight. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, he was only inferior to the Grand Duke. The Dragon Knight. It could not be mentioned in the same breath as the Sky Knight. It seemed that the Dragon Knight was above the perfection-level Sky Knight, but in fact the gap between them was a bottomless chasm. Only by obtaining a dragon could one build a bridge, turning a natural moat into a path. List was very lucky to have met his own dragon at the age of 18. Unfortunately, the fire dragon only ate and did not produce. With a "I have a dragon but I am low-key" attitude, List warmly entertained the guests and ate a sumptuous lunch in the dining hall. Although the money for potions was not enough, the castle did not lack ordinary food. Mrs. Abby, with her team of chefs, had already conquered new foods such as stir-frying and roasting. Seafood was everywhere, pastries were dazzling, and even staple foods were divided into several types: dumplings, noodles, bread, steamed buns, millet rice, and so on. Unfortunately, the chef Barwell was still unable to make tofu, which made List so angry that he wanted to hack him to death. He was simply a swindler who cheated him of 10 gold coins of sponsorship funds. Otherwise, tofu alone could be used in countless ways, adding more rich dishes to the castle. Even so, after the lunch, the aristocrats still praised the castle's sumptuous food and asked whether they could send chefs to learn from Mrs. Abby. List cleared his throat and said, "Apart from some unique recipes, Mrs. Abby will certainly be willing to teach you other dishes if you want to learn them. However, the most authentic dishes can only be eaten in the Flower Town. You are welcome to visit the Flower Town and taste these delicacies." Chapter 529. After the birthday, List counted the gifts brought by the guests. In addition to his grandmother's pot of unexpected green ingot sprite worm, the other gifts were mostly various resources. For example, the gift from the Count and his wife was a batch of valuable jade, while the Levis couple sent 10 pounds of lead metal. Lead was used for magic resistance. If it was mixed into equipment, it could increase the resistance to magic. Therefore, lead metal is very valuable and is a good auxiliary material for casting armor and weapons. In fact, every metal has properties related to magic, which are recorded in detail in a magic book called Metal and Magic Observation Notes. Iron has a good magic conductivity, copper has a good magic adhesion, silver has a good magic condensation, gold has a good magic amplification. Of course, compared to their magic properties, gold, silver, and copper have a greater value as currency. The total value of these gifts is only 2/3 of the cost of the birthday party. Sure enough, I knew I would lose money on my birthday. Throwing away the account book, List was too lazy to look at it anymore. He went straight out of the castle, rode Loki, and flew to the Sea View Villa in the sunset. The Siren Aichi did not go out. She was making magic equipment according to the experiments recorded in the magic book. At the level of a great mage, the research on magic power had been fully transferred to the field of magic arrays. The strength of a great wizard is based on the understanding of magic arrays. In this regard, a chi can be described as talented, and her progress is amazing. She is now fully proficient in the 2 high-level magic, Water Wave Shield and Water Waterfall. Although she can't do it instantaneously like ordinary magic, the casting time can be compressed to within 3 seconds. She also quickly learned another high-level water magic, Powerful Water Pillar, which was just brought by Elksun. Unfortunately, she can only learn water magic and her strength is limited. If a chi's talent is transferred to human beings, she can be compatible with all attributes of magic, and her strength will definitely increase by a lot. Compared to her, the other great magician, Crazy Truth, who was supervising the construction of the Mage Tower, was far from being able to learn high-level magic. Even now, she had not mastered the Water Wave Shield, and her progress in training was staggering. Actually, Crazy was already an outstanding talent among the human magicians, but Achi was the only one who could compare to her. "Brother." Achi welcomed List with a smile. The little siren, who was 42 years old this year, had gradually matured through her contact with List and the magic books. However, what remained unchanged was her innocence and her growing dependence on List. "What magic equipment are you making?" "It's a black pearl pendant. Achi is almost done." "Big brother, those small black pearls of yours can be made into waist pendants by Achi in the future and then sold. Selling the mana waist pendant will definitely be more profitable than selling the raw black pearls," Achi said with a grin. She had gradually understood the principles of economics and knew that processed products were more profitable than raw materials. In fact, this had always been List's train of thought. As the soul of a civilized modern man, he knew very well that the profit from selling raw materials was far less than the profit from fine processing. For the development of his territory, he was also opposed to the sale of raw materials. He hoped that they could be refined before being sold. It was the same kind of corn, but after it was brewed into liquor, the price could be said to have increased by 100 or even 1,000 times. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible for him to grow corn and sell it directly. In addition to eating, all the corn and grains had to be used to make liquor. He would even import primary agricultural products such as grains from the outside, and after processing, produce liquor and pastries. He would then sell them to the public. Ichi is really capable. Liszt praised the siren and then took out a few books. These are the notes on magic arrays compiled by the great mage Chrissy. Take them for reference, and if you want, write some notes. I'll give them to Chrissy for reference. Only by communicating with each other can we better explore the truth. Ichi took the notes and nodded vigorously. The mangrove sprite flew out of the shell, holding a peanut candy in its hand, and handed it to Liszt. Tweet. It was treating. Liszt was not interested in the peanut candy. Instead, he took out the latest chocolate peanut candy produced by the peanut processing workshop and handed it to Nami. Here, try the more delicious chocolate peanut candy. Tweet. Nami tilted her head, took the new candy wrapped in dry leaves, then smiled sweetly, peeled off the leaves, held the chocolate peanut candy and bit off a corner. After chewing 2 bites, she handed the chocolate peanut candy back to Liszt, shook her head and picked up her peanut nougat again. You don't like chocolate? Liszt rewrapped the chocolate peanut candy. Then I'll take it back and give it to Mickey. He likes chocolate peanut candy very much. Nami said quickly, chirp, chirp, chirp. Liszt did not understand. Ichi raised her head and translated for Liszt. Brother, Nami wants to play with Mickey, but he doesn't want to play with Ella. Obviously, no elf liked to play with the grumpy Ella. In fact, few elves liked to play with other elves. They had the independent personality of plants and did not like to live in groups. Well, I'll bring Mickey with me next time. Tweet. Nami was very happy. She was a little elf who liked to play with other elves. But in fact, Mickey did not like to play with Nami. He was also an independent elf and only liked to play with himself. He chatted with Ichi for a while. After teasing Nami and touching the kelp worm, seaweed worm, redstone flower worm, horsetail worm, and black horn worm swimming in the shell, Liszt left the Sea View Villa so as not to disturb Ichi's study. Magicians were prone to indulge in experiments. He came to chat with Ichi more to let Ichi relax. Doing experiments all day, he was worried that Ichi would catch the bad habits of magicians and become psychopathic. In fact, he treated Chris the same way. He did not want her to become a crazy great magician like the Goat Gathering. This kind of relaxation was called mental physiotherapy by Liszt, and he was a psychological expert who solved mental problems for magicians. Such days continued until early April. In order to get a promotion, territorial officials worked day and night on the front line of spring plowing. Finally, nearly 3 million acres of land on Black Horse Island were sown with seeds regardless of whether they could germinate or not, and regardless of whether there was enough labor for the next step of farming. At least the farming task was completed. Task completed. Reward, 22 dragon pigs. In the newly established Estuary Pig Farm, in Red River Town adjacent to the mouth of the Red River, 2 old sows, fed with a large amount of high-quality pig feed, finally began to give birth one after another. The pig farm manager in charge of midwifery brought out 22 young piglets in succession. When the good news came, Liszt personally went to the Estuary Pig Farm to check the 22 dragon pigs. After finding that they were all healthy, he decisively rewarded the pig farm staff with a silver coin each. And then, he classified the new dragon pigs separately and named them the Estuary Pig. Chapter 530. The birth of estuary pigs means that the arrival of dragon pork is not far away. According to the information obtained by Liszt and the pig farm manager, the original species of estuary pigs is a long-striped pig. This kind of pig is a fast-maturing breed that can generally mate in 6 months. In other words, by October this year, estuary pigs can mate and another batch of piglets will be born in January or February next year. Breeding pigs that are specially kept for breeding must not be eaten, but piglets crossed with ordinary long-striped pigs can of course be eaten. There will probably be piglets to eat in February next year. Very good dragon pork. I don't know what it will taste like. He secretly looked forward to it. At the same time he thought of the dragon cows. In Horse Town, half of the hillside of Needle Grass Hill has been set aside, alfalfa worm stalks have been moved, and alfalfa, the favorite food of cows, has been planted to build a bampo cattle farm. When the grassland is abundant, the dragon cows can be moved here. Next year the cows can be pregnant at the age of 2, and the year after that they can produce milk. The real dragon milk will also come. With the construction of the bampo cattle farm, the dragon cows also have a new name, bampo cattle. Estuary pigs and bampo cattle are all to conceal the dragon blood in them, plus the black blood horses of Black Horse Ranch. These are the dragon livestock owned by List. After inspecting the estuary pig cubs, he rode Loki around Black Horse Island to inspect the progress of all the new towns. At present, on Black Horse Island, the port town has begun to take shape. With the migration of a large number of industries, the town has become more prosperous and is not much worse than Flower Town. In particular, the increasingly large glass workshop accommodated more than 800 workers. On the other side, the Fire Dragon Brick Factory, which had been renamed the Black Horse Kiln Factory, had absorbed more than 1,300 workers. It had a pottery workshop, a brick workshop, a charcoal workshop, and a new material workshop, which continued to develop porcelain, cement, lime, etc. If it weren't for the magic of the fire dragon as fuel, the port town would now be full of smoke. Therefore, as an elemental dragon, the fire dragon's only output is probably to burn boilers. In addition to the port town, Newport Town has also begun to take shape. The new port has been built, and the shipyard has begun to refurbish old ships and reorganize the three-masted galleon Sunset. He also transferred some of the carpenters from the Flower Town's carpentry workshop and built a new sampan workshop here, specializing in the production of sampans for fishermen. In addition, Red River Town and Herding Horse Town had already taken shape, Grain Town had just started construction, Thorn Town had barely started construction, and Green Tea Town was still on the drawing board. Overall, it was thriving. After a round of inspection, List returned to Port Town. The first thing he did was to check on the progress of the Wizard Tower. 2 of the 5 floors had already been built. Then he talked to Crazy Truth, who had moved the entire magic workshop here. He also took away this month's potions, mainly the Ice Flame Potion. List was very excited as he felt a whole box of Ice Flame Potions in the gem space. After the expansion of the Frost Flame Mushroom this year, despite the lack of manpower, there was still a good harvest. I can finally eat to my heart's content. These should be enough to support me and Charmander for 10 days. He silently calculated in his heart. At present, the Frost Flame Mushroom greenhouse had been expanded to 500 mu. In addition to the 150 mu of greenhouses in Flower Town, the rest were in the area south of Needle Grass Hill on Black Horse Island. The northern hillside was where the Bampo cattle farm was. 500 mu is still not enough. I have to expand another 500 mu of greenhouses as soon as possible to complete the new task. The Dragon Pig task was completed, and a new smoke task was released. Task: the harvest of the Frost Flame Mushroom slightly alleviates your need for potions. The importance of potions that do not require elves to cultivate can be seen. Please continue to expand the scale of the mushroom greenhouse to 1000 mu. Reward: Giant Algae Forest. List did not know what the Giant Algae Forest was. It sounded like a forest of algae on the bottom of the sea. There may be rich fishery resources in it. He had asked Chi to try to pay attention to the giant algae when swimming in the sea. The giant algae forest must be in the sea, and he could only rely on Chi to find it. 1,000 mu of farmland was easy to grow crops, but 1,000 mu of greenhouses was much more difficult to grow shiitake mushrooms. Shiitake mushrooms, including the variant flame mushroom and frost flame mushroom, required a high level of skill to grow. It was not something an ordinary serf could grow. Currently, there were no more than 300 people in his territory who could grow these 3 kinds of shiitake mushrooms. Of course, the flame mushroom was the only magic ingredient that List could get and quickly grow on a large scale. Therefore, he invested a lot of energy in this area. He arranged for each of the 300 shiitake farmers to lead 10 apprentices. After teaching them, he would lead more apprentices. In addition, there was a division of labor. The shiitake farmers were responsible for the raw materials, temperature, and management of the greenhouses, while the apprentices were responsible for the heavy work. Only in this way could new greenhouses be opened and more flame mushrooms could be grown. The frost flame mushroom could no longer be grown as the weather turned hot. Advisor Gort: the shiitake greenhouses must be expanded to 1,000 mu within half a month. The number of shiitake farmers also needs to continue to expand. I have decided to build a new town here, called Shiitake Town. It will specifically serve these shiitake farmers and become the main production base for my potions. Gort was already immune to List's whims. He nodded without hesitation. Sir, please rest assured I will transfer a group of officials to build Shiitake Town. You must take charge of this matter. The flame mushroom is very important to me. Milord, your cultivation concerns the future of all of our followers, so we definitely don't dare to be careless. You must know, as your follower, I am excited every day and have an unlimited fighting spirit. Even though I do not have your talent, but to be able to follow you to a great future, I have already surpassed too many territory knight. Such blatant flattery did not arouse List's disgust. Of course it did not feel too good either. Because Gort often flattered, List was also immune to it. He smiled and said, "You are my home teacher. A lot of my knowledge was taught by you. As long as you follow me with all your heart, I will definitely promise you a bright future." Gort immediately knelt on one knee and made a knight's salute. "Thank you, sir. Gort swears to be loyal to sir." "Get up. The territory needs you. Finish the construction of the shiitake greenhouses as soon as possible." Understood. After leaving Black Horse Island, List happily took potions with Charmander for 10 days. Charmander was so happy that it roared, "Oh roar," every day. List also obtained a lot of impurities to upgrade his dragon's fighting spirit. His strength steadily improved, getting stronger day by day. While he drank the pills, he would often ride Loki back to White Birch City. His destination was the extinct volcano between Baihua City and North Valley City. The extinct volcano had no official name. It was a barren mountain similar to Thorn's Ridge. The local serfs called it the Missing Tooth Mountain because there was a big gap in the crater. From a distance, it looked like half of a tooth was missing. Arriving at his destination, he landed in the middle of the crater. List released Charmander and let it hover freely. He rode Loki and kept exploring around the crater. Chapter 531. Of course, the lava passage was not found. List cast magic eyes to find 2 sprite worms around, but he found nothing. The Deficient Fangs Mountain was an extinct volcano. Probably because it had been dead for too long, it had completely weathered into an ordinary mountain range. There was no trace of magma or even geothermal energy. There was no hot spring, no heat, no karst cave, just an ordinary mountain range. "Leo, let's go back," List shouted. The little fire dragon, which was hovering in the sky chasing the bird, suddenly swooped down and suddenly turned into a flame less than 3 meters away from List. It rushed into List's body and almost knocked List over. He took 2 steps back and stabilized his body. He immediately scolded the little fire dragon in his heart. "Steady yourself, how many times have you gone home? Be gentle." "Brr." The little fire dragon responded, but without any emotion. It did not listen to what List said at all. It was not easy to train it like a blizzard beast. Perhaps the growth cycle of the dragon was too long. Although it was smart, the degree of adaptation was calculated in units of years. In short, after more than a month of training, the biggest change in the little fire dragon was that it accepted its new name, Leo. As for why List gave the little fire dragon this name, probably only List himself knew. Leaving the Deficient Fangs Mountain, List rode Loki and flew to the beach south of Coral Island. He went to see the intermediate World of Warcraft purple sand crocodile. The crocodile was leisurely basking in the sun on the beach. When it saw List's arrival, it immediately became alert and raised its head to make an attack posture. "I really want to kill it and eat its meat. Unfortunately, it's a bit embarrassing. I somewhat understand that the Count probably deliberately kept the purple sand crocodile to maintain Coral Island's World of Warcraft species. The relationship between humans and World of Warcraft on the continent is that if there is one, one will kill one. But in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, isolated overseas, World of Warcraft is a rare species. Most of the time, World of Warcraft would be domesticated or protected in their habitats to allow World of Warcraft meat to continue to grow. List's previous method of wiping out all of Thorn's Ridge's World of Warcraft wasn't advisable. He did not know what the human in front of him was thinking. But the crocodile instinctively sensed danger. It opened its mouth and spat out a spell water wave shield. Instantly, a light blue circle of light enveloped it completely. Seeing this, List slowly unsheathed the Sky Cutter greatsword. The surging dragon's do chi circulated within his body, ready to strike. Boom. The first to attack was not List, but the crocodile. The crocodile madly cast the spell water arrow volley. Countless water arrows flew towards List like sharp arrows. List leaped into the air, dodging the crocodile's magic. The sky cutter greatsword suddenly waved in the air, and a burning sunset flew out, turning into a line of fire that collided with the purple sand crocodile's water wave shield. Rumble. The purple sand crocodile's water wave shield couldn't withstand it at all. A second later, it directly shattered. The high-grade fire attribute dragon's do chi that had not completely dissipated sprinkled on its purple luster scales, instantly burning the purple sand crocodile's scales. Goo goo. The purple sand crocodile let out a blood-curdling screech. It simply could not block List's sword. Of course, this could only be regarded as a flesh wound. Seeing its appearance, List gently landed on the ground and put away the sky cutter greatsword. He whistled to summon Loki, mounted him, and left the beach without looking back. He already felt his strength exploding. Ordinary World of Warcraft players would find it difficult to resist his charged sword. It was just a test of attack power. There was no need to kill the purple sand crocodile. I wonder how many of my swords the Count can block now? If the Sapphire Grand Duke came without relying on the Sapphire Dragon, and only relying on Dragon's Do Chi and Chi secret books, can I block 2 or 3 of his swords? The Sapphire family definitely has Chi secret skills that focus on lethality. Although I have 2 Chi secret skills, they are auxiliary. In terms of the Count, List's strength was already above that of all the Sky Knights. However, he could not measure a Grand Duke who might become a Dragon Knight. My current strength is probably still quite far from that of Marquis Bull. At the time, Marquis Bull fought dozens of Sky Knights alone. Although he was eventually forced to flee, but his strength after transforming into a lich was beyond doubt. List was now confident that he could crush 2 or 3 Sky Knights. If there were more, he could only flee. He was far worse than Bull. Of course. His strength was now in a period of rapid growth and he was improving every day. After all, he was a Dragon Knight who was about to ride a dragon. The confident Dragon Knight who had yet to ride a dragon. After returning to the Flower Town, his mood was no longer so cheerful. The reason was simple: his magic potions were out of stock again. The little fire dragon began to cry for potions, and his own cultivation began to slow down without the help of magic potions. It was a very uncomfortable feeling to abruptly cut off the upward momentum. It is now mid-April, about 5 or 6 months before the expansion order. I really want to rush directly to the Eagle Kingdom and plunder a batch of resources. It is best to capture 1 or 2 marquis and counts. I am afraid the ransom is enough for me to eat my fill. When there was no magic potion to take, List would always unconsciously have the idea of plundering. While restraining this greed, he could not help but sigh. No wonder there are wars every year. The resources consumed by the knight's cultivation always drive the nobles to compete with each other. Even a modern person like me who grew up in a peaceful era can't help but get involved. He endured. Night came. He went to the Seaview Villa and chatted with Achi. Achi suddenly mentioned an interesting thing. Brother, Achi found a big colorful fish on the Black Horse Island. It was like a beautiful colorful dolphin. It must be a sea monster. Achi wanted to catch up with it and catch it for my brother, but it swam very fast and got into a large area of seaweed. I couldn't find it. Colorful dolphin? What kind of sea monster is this? List's surprise at the colorful dolphin flashed, and then he focused his attention on another point. A large area of seaweed? Yes, there is a large area of seaweed under the sea, like a forest on the bottom of the sea. Achi went in and was dizzy. It is the first time that Achi has found so many seaweeds together on the bottom of the sea, and there are a lot of fish living in them. A large area of seaweed, a forest on the bottom of the sea. These 2 pieces of information were quickly reflected in List's mind, reminding him of the smoke mission. Without thinking too much, he immediately summoned the smoke mission. Sure enough, the content of the mission had changed. Mission completed. Reward: giant seaweed forest. About 1,000 acres of mushroom greenhouses had been built, so the new mission was immediately issued. Mission: the siren's keen sense of touch perceives the uniqueness of the giant seaweed forest, but she does not practice magic eyes and cannot see the essence. Maybe you need to explore it yourself and uncover the secrets of the giant seaweed forest. Reward: a sprite worm. There was a sprite worm lurking in the giant seaweed forest. It was probably the giant seaweed worm. Although he could not afford to develop the seabed planting industry for the time being, List still looked forward to every sprite worm. Achi, where did you find the giant seaweed forest? Achi thought for a moment and replied, it's about 500 meters away from the southeast corner of the Black Horse Island. The water depth is about 30 meters. There are many rocks on the bottom of the sea, and the giant seaweed grows on the rocks. It's like a rope extending to the surface of the sea, so dense that I can't see the end. Chapter 532. In the southeast corner of Black Horse Island, there is a bare beach with some scattered wooden houses. Although it is impossible to grow crops here, there are abundant seafood resources on the beach. The port town sampan fishing team often comes here to catch seafood to provide food for the territory. At this time List, wearing only leather armor and shorts, was sitting on a sampan and rowing to the sea. All his entourage stayed on the beach. He came to explore the giant kelp forest on the bottom of the sea alone. Because he needs to communicate with the siren Chi at all times, it is very inconvenient to bring his entourage. With a Chi at the bottom of the sea, it was easy to come to the top of the giant kelp forest, hang down a rope, and let a Chi fix the sampan. Before List was ready to dive to the bottom of the sea, he asked, "A Chi, although I can swim, it is difficult to exert my strength in the sea. After all, I have fire attribute Chi. I need you to guide me." "Brother, don't worry, a Chi will protect you just like I protect a Chi. At present, the limit of my breath holding time is 15 minutes. In order to speed up the exploration, I need you to take me swimming." Okay. A Chi swims very fast. If List swims by himself, he would probably spend more than half of the 15 minutes holding time swimming. There is not much time to explore the giant kelp forest. He took a deep breath. Crush. List jumped directly into the sea, followed the current manipulated by a Chi, and quickly dived to the bottom. His strong physical fitness allows him to rely on Chi to slow down the use of oxygen. If the physical rules of the world are the same as those of the earth, and combustion and breathing are carried out using oxygen. In this world, ordinary people can probably hold their breath for a minute. It is normal for regular trained fishermen to hold their breath for 3 or 5 minutes. Any higher, one must rely on Chi. There is a trainee knight on Black Horse Island who often dives. He can hold his breath for 20 minutes and can hold his breath for 30 minutes when stationary. List hasn't trained much. The record for holding his breath with the help of Chi is 15 minutes, and he can hold his breath for 18 minutes when stationary. The sea is exceptionally clear. Although the field of vision is narrower than on land, it is still possible to see a long distance. A Chi manipulates the water in the shell, wrapping him quickly to the edge of the giant kelp forest. Looking at it, the whole giant kelp forest really looks like a forest growing on the bottom of the sea. The giant kelp stretches straight to the surface of the sea, blocking the sun into fine light. Most of them are yellow or green. It looked a little like kelp. However, the giant seaweed had a trunk with many slender leaves that swayed left and right as the seawater flowed. Their roots gripped the rocks of the seabed, and many small fish swam between the giant algae. Sometimes the small fish would stir up the giant algae, entangling them together. There were also a large number of corals, sea anemones, and other creatures on the seabed. List was not in the mood to appreciate the beauty of the seabed. He quickly cast magic eyes and scanned the giant algae, but he did not find the light of mana retroaction. He patted a Chi's shell. A Chi understood and immediately controlled the water flow, bringing List with her as she swam towards the giant algae. However, they swam around the periphery of the forest on the offshore end. Magic Eye kept scanning, looking for possible worm stalks. 15 minutes passed in the blink of an eye, but he did not see any worm stalks. List floated to the surface of the water and took a deep breath. He then let a Chi bring him to the next part of the giant algae forest. The giant algae forest on the seabed was indeed boundless, with no end in sight. Inside the giant algae forest, the light was poor and the field of vision was very short, which increased the difficulty of Magic Eye's observation. However, List's temperament was that once he did it, he would complete it. There was no reason for him to give up halfway. Once or twice he continued to search for more of the kelp forest. Finally, after 3 hours of searching, on his 9th dive, he saw the light he wanted to see. The light of chaotic colors was distributed on a giant algae more than 30 meters long. It almost reached the surface of the sea. Quickly swimming towards the giant algae, List quickly found the yellow-brown sprite worm entrenched at the roots of the kelp. Originally, List thought of letting a Chi contract the giant algae worm, but since he had been working hard for so long, he might as well do it himself. Thereupon he took out jade powder and sprinkled it at the roots of the giant algae. The jade powder swayed a bit in the seawater and was not easy to adhere to. However, it still successfully attracted the giant algae worm, which slowly swam over and licked the jade powder. Next, while it was opening its mouth, List forcibly stuffed his finger into it. He took a bite. He felt a telepathic connection. He had already successfully contracted with the giant algae worm. He could feel the calm, tranquil and relaxed mood of the little guy, as if he had transformed into a giant algae quietly stretching out in the sea. Together with the giant algae worm, he quickly floated to the surface of the water. Huff. He let out a long breath, inhaling the salty and fishy air on the surface of the sea. When Achi also emerged from the water and opened her shell, he directly threw the giant algae worm into Achi's shell and said, "Achi, take good care of this giant algae worm for me." Emichim. Achi's shell had practically become a small worm house for the sprite worm, following Achi around every day. "Let me rest for a while, then we will go back." List was lifted by the water current controlled by Achi to float on the surface of the sea and restore his strength. At the same time he called for a smoke mission. Mission complete. Reward, 1 giant algae sprite worm. 3 hours of hard work in exchange for a sprite worm was well worth it. The only regrettable thing was that the seaweed crops cultivated by the sea sprite worms were in the sea. The seaweed and seaweed grown by the kelp worm and seaweed sprite worms had already become food for the fishermen. However, the seaweed grown by the redstone flower worm, horsetail worm, and black horn worm had yet to be used. As for the giant algae worm, it was unknown whether the giant algae it represented could be eaten. If it could be eaten, the fishermen could come and catch it. In a trance. The serpentines composed of smoke distorted and reorganized the content. Mission: the giant algae sprite worm seems to be only a corner of the giant algae forest's secrets. This vast undersea forest is worth exploring further and deeper into the forest to fully unearth its secrets. Reward: a new species of giant algae. List was surprised. He did not expect that the giant algae forest mission was still not over. It seemed to be a chain mission. A new species of giant algae, what kind is it? Could it be a magic ingredient? Whether it was a magic ingredient or not, the exploration of the giant algae forest had to continue. It was already late in the morning, so he made an appointment with Achi to continue in the afternoon. List swam to the sampan and rowed to the shore. Surrounded by servants, he put on his frac abier and returned to the port town for lunch. After lunch he took a nap. The search continued. Chapter 533. List had already overestimated the size of the forest of giant algae as much as possible, but after diving underwater and exploring, List was still amazed by the size of the forest of giant algae. It was ridiculously large, and for the whole afternoon he and Achi were almost lost in the forest of giant algae. Fortunately, after unremitting efforts, List's magic eye finally found the light of mana retroaction, which was a whole piece of giant algae exuding the light of magic. Their appearance was almost no different from ordinary giant algae, perhaps a little smaller, but the whole body was still more than 20 to 30 meters long. One by one they were mixed among the ordinary giant algae. There was no doubt that this was the new secret of the smoke mission, the magic ingredient giant algae. And it was a lot of magic ingredient giant algae. Looking at the endless, dense magic ingredient giant algae exuding the light of chaos magic, List could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Then he choked on the water, and Achi reacted in time to send him out of the water. But he still drank a few mouthfuls of seawater, and kept coughing on the surface of the sea. "Brother, are you okay?" Achi patted his back with concern, helping him to breathe. List stopped coughing for a while, floating on the water and gasping for breath, but his emotions were still resisting the wind. "I'm okay, I just choked on some water." "Achi, do you know what I found in the forest of giant algae? Its magic ingredient. There's a sea of giant medicinal algae. You can't see the end of it." "Ah, magic ingredient giant algae." Achi cheered. "Yes, it's the magic ingredient giant algae. Recently, I'm in urgent need of magic ingredients. The magic ingredients produced in the territory can't meet my needs, and it's also very difficult to buy them from outside. I didn't expect that the forest of giant algae you found would have so many magic ingredient giant algae." Achi was sincerely happy for him. "Great, brother can smoothly drink magic ingredient again." List smiled proudly. There was a burst of warmth in his chest. Obviously the little fire dragon had already felt his emotions, and understood that he would soon have magic ingredient to eat. List took a deep breath and motioned for Achi to continue to dive with him to determine the scope and number of the giant algae. Most importantly, he had to find a second giant algae worm. Apart from mushrooms and other types of sprite grass, as long as other plants have magic ingredients, they will also have sprite worms. The position of this magic medicine giant seaweed is already far away from the giant seaweed worm stalk ahead. This means that there is another giant seaweed worm hiding nearby. Diving. Search. Today was destined to be a day of harvest. Chi soon found a new giant algae and its worm stalk. Following this, List used the jade powder to successfully form a contract with the giant algae worm. After the contract, he was thrown into a cheese shell. The sea elves preferred the environment of the sea. Breaking through the seawater and floating on the surface, List was in a very good mood. The setting sun had already sunk into the horizon, and the afterglow dyed half the sky red. The seawater was also dyed red, as if large balls of flames were dancing on the surface of the sea. It's time to go back. Looking at the setting sun that was about to disappear, he smiled slightly. Tomorrow I will arrange for fishermen to come and fish up the magic medicine giant algae, as well as the non-magic medicine giant algae. Move the 2 giant seaweed worm stalks over to expand the growth range of the giant algae magic ingredient, so that the sea can cultivate more magic ingredients for me. He concentrated his mind a little. The smoke mission was quickly summoned. Mission completed. Reward, giant seaweed worm. Then he took a look at the new mission. The magic medicine giant seaweed is a huge discovery. It can effectively relieve the pressure on your magic ingredient demand. However, the area of the magic medicine giant seaweed seems to have exceeded the range of influence of the giant seaweed sprite worm. Please find other sprites affecting the magic medicine giant seaweed. Reward, 1 giant seaweed sprite. What? At first, List did not care about it. He thought that the 2 giant seaweed worms and the magic medicine giant seaweed from the giant seaweed forest were already very worthwhile. But he did not expect that the highlight was yet to come. Unexpectedly, there were still giant seaweed sprites hiding in the giant seaweed forest. He adjusted his breathing, suppressed his fluctuating emotions, and calmly said to Chi, "Have you noticed that the magic medicine giant seaweed seems to have exceeded the range of influence of the giant seaweed sprite worm?" Chi was very smart and immediately understood. Her big eyes shone. "Brother, are you saying that there are other giant seaweed worms here? Perhaps it is not only the giant seaweed worms, but also the giant seaweed sprites. This giant seaweed forest is really too big. It is unknown for how many years it has been growing. It is very difficult to determine how many sprites it has given birth to." The more List thought about it, the more he felt that his train of thought was correct. "Chi, there must be more sprites waiting for us to explore. Brother, should we continue the search? It is dark and the light is dim. It will be very inconvenient for me to dive again. There is no need to be impatient. Chi, let's go back first and continue the search tomorrow." "All right." After returning to the port town, List had already sorted out how to deal with the giant seaweed forest. There was no doubt that when the magic medicine giant seaweed was discovered, it had changed from an interesting seabed plant to an indispensable strategic resource of the territory. I have Chi's help so I can easily determine the area of the seaweed forest. But for the fishermen, it is difficult to distinguish the location of the giant seaweed forest from the area of the magic medicine giant seaweed. They do not have the coordinates to determine the location. So I need to help them determine the coordinates of the giant seaweed. He immediately ordered his servants to prepare ropes and a sampan. Using ropes to fix the sampan, they would mark the edge of the giant seaweed forest and the distribution area of the magic medicine giant seaweed. Of course, this was only a temporary measure. The best way was to learn from the seaside aquaculture on Earth and use floating balls to plan the aquaculture fields in the sea. They would harvest the magic medicine giant seaweed regularly and work hard to explore the cultivation techniques of the giant seaweed. Until now, we have not found out how big the giant seaweed forest is. Based on the area we have explored so far, this giant seaweed forest is very likely to have an area of tens of thousands of acres. Tens of thousands of acres? List and Chi had explored at most a small part of the area. So the next day, with ropes and sampan, he did not go into the water to search for the giant seaweed sprite. Instead, he busied himself with defining the boundary of the giant seaweed forest. He put down the sampan at intervals of 1 kilometer and had Chi fix it with ropes. He toiled until the night, using a total of 23 sampans to draw the boundary of the giant seaweed forest. Next, he rode Loki and surveyed the sky above the giant seaweed forest, drawing the positions of the sampans. He obtained the irregular shape of the giant seaweed forest. Then he drew it on thick bast paper and roughly calculated it. It was concluded that the area of the giant seaweed forest might reach 24 square kilometers, or about 36,000 acres. This area was equivalent to the area of the flower town. It's really huge. Next, I should look for the giant seaweed sprite and determine the scope of the magic medicine giant seaweed. After finding the giant seaweed, he should send someone to retrieve it and then send it to the magic workshop to have Chris Truth make it into a magic medicine. There were no magic medicines to take. The jade powder couldn't be scattered far in the water. But the smell it emitted successfully attracted the giant algae sprite. 2 minutes later, it openly appeared in List's sight and shrank back. It repeated this 2 or 3 times before it began to approach List and lick the jade powder that was sprinkled on the giant algae sprite. From time to time, it turned its head and looked at List, opening its mouth and letting out vague sounds. That sound was similar to Guru. It was also yellow-brown and sparkling like a crystal, and there was a super small algae the length of a finger on top of its head. Its big eyes were full of spirit, but the teeth in its mouth were very sharp, which added a hint of fierceness to its beauty. It didn't have wings, but there were transparent fin-like structures on its ears, armpits, calves and tail. Obviously, the structure of the sprites in the sea was very different from that of the sprites on land. List didn't disturb it. He just looked at it with great interest, letting it eat up the jade powder on the giant algae. Then he took out another handful of jade powder, put it on his hand and slowly stretched it towards the giant algae sprite. If it was a human, even a kindergartner wouldn't fall for this kind of rough seduction. But the other party was just a giant algae sprite. It tilted its head and thought for a dozen seconds, then bared its teeth and quickly swam over, hugged List's hand and began to lick the jade powder. List took advantage of its unpreparedness and quietly stuck his middle finger into its mouth. The sprite reacted and opened its mouth to bite. It was very painful. It directly bit List's finger until it bled, but the contract was also completed in an instant. The moment their minds were connected, List could still feel its vigilance, nervousness and ruthlessness. But this feeling was soon replaced by puzzlement and affection. The giant algae sprite was probably confused. Why did this annoying guy make me feel so intimate? Little guy, I finally caught you. List operated the dragon's fighting spirit to stop the bleeding on his finger, and then held the giant algae sprite in his palm. He motioned for a chi to send him to the surface of the water. The giant algae sprite was a little unhappy. It didn't like to leave the water. Chapter 535. The grumbling giant algae sprite became the 4th sprite under List's command. Its arrival represented the huge giant algae magic ingredient. With 3 giant algae sprite worms and 1 giant algae lesser sprite, I can cultivate at least 1,100 mu of magic ingredient giant algae. List looked at the giant algae lesser sprite hanging from his arm and swaying along with the waves, feeling elated. The giant algae sprite's temper was clearly not so mild. It also did not have a favorable impression of a chi like Nami. When a chi was about to touch it, it twisted its body to avoid her, turned its head and bared its teeth at a chi. Grumble. It was warning a chi not to touch it. Little guy, this is a siren, understand? When I am not in the sea you will follow it, understand? Grumble. Don't grumble, she also has your favorite jade powder. List gave a chi a meaningful glance, hinting for her to take out some jade powder. Sure enough, Milk was mother. After a chi took out the jade powder, the giant algae sprite did not hesitate for more than 3 seconds before rushing over and eating the jade powder a chi fed it. When a chi reached out to touch it, it showed no reaction, just like when List had tempted it. It simply could not resist the temptation of the jade powder. Fortunately, after contracting with a sprite, if it does not take the initiative to terminate the contract, others cannot contract with it a second time. Otherwise, it would have been abducted by others in less than 3 days. List no longer paid attention to the giant algae sprite that was eating the jade powder and exclaiming, "Delicious." Instead, he focused his attention. He summoned the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward, 1 giant algae sprite. Then a new mission arrived. Mission, the giant algae forest has not been fully explored. In fact, you have only uncovered a corner of the forest and have yet to explore its core secrets. Ichi is a good helper. Why not let her help you dive deeper and find more secrets? Reward, 1 low-ranking dragon species sea monster. Low-ranking dragon species sea monster. What's going on? Ever since I got the smoke mission and obtained the smoke dragon's power of fate, I seem to have become fated with dragons and dragon-type life forms? Dragon-type creatures included wyverns, subdragons, draconic beasts and dragon-type beasts. List had contact with the wyvern, including the light dragon of the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf. Paris was the black dragon of the light dragon, the sapphire dragon, the guardian dragon of his country which he had met once on Iron Hoof Island, the smoke dragon which he had not met, but the smoke dragon was always there. The invisible dragon had met him twice and sent him 4 space gems. They belonged to his old friends. Finally, there was the dead fire dragon on Black Horse Island, and the little fire dragon, Leo, who was born from the remains of the fire dragon. All day long he was shouting, "Oh roar," and "Oh roar" to take potions. He had only come into contact with one viper, and the situation was a little unclear. Marquis Merlin had given him a phoenix feather, but it was swallowed by Charmander before it could warm up. After that, List wrote another letter to Marquis Merlin, inquiring about the situation of the phoenix feather. He learned that this phoenix feather was seized from the Taro family's expansion order, and there was only one of it. Dragon beast. Loki was a dragon beast. Dragon-type wild beasts such as Bampo cattle, Estuarine pigs and black blood horses. Now there was another low-level dragon-type sea monster. Sea monsters were a type of World of Warcraft, and this could also be regarded as a dragon beast. The dragon beast in the sea, I wonder what kind it is. Is it a fish or a whale or maybe a crab, lobster, shell or starfish? In any case, the exploration of the giant kelp forest was still not complete, and even the range of the giant kelp magic ingredient had not been determined. There were still sprites in this underwater forest. There was even an even more explosive secret. However, there was no time to search today. Unknowingly, the sun had already set on the sea. List was ready to take the giant kelp sprite back, but the giant kelp sprite was unwilling to leave the sea. If it was just a sprite worm, then he could take it away. However, it was a sprite with independent thinking, and could no longer be simply regarded as a farming tool. Then you will spend the night with a chi. List did not force the giant kelp sprite to leave the sea. However, he had already planned to build a sea worm house in the canal below the castle that connected to the sea when the new castle was built in the future, so that the sea sprites could be sheltered. Before parting, a chi who was holding the giant kelp sprite suddenly asked, "Big brother, what are you going to name this giant kelp sprite?" A name? List pondered for a moment and then made a decision. Let's call it Fitz. The meaning of the name is tidal spirit. It is a sea sprite born along with the tide. Fitz. Achi did not comment on the name. She was concerned about the other information in List's words. Big brother, since Fitz and the others are sea sprites, then what is a chi? Big brother, you said that a chi is a sea sprite. When she asked this question, the little siren was somewhat disappointed. Originally, the title of sea sprite was her exclusive possession. List smiled and gently stroked Achi's beautiful blue hair. Achi, you are a siren and sirens are sea sprites. Fitz and the others are farming sprites. They just live in the sea and have no direct connection with the sea. Yahi. She said goodbye to List. Achi took Fitz and continued to swim in the giant kelp forest. She was a siren, and the sea was her place to roam freely. She was going to continue to search to see if she could find new sprites to reduce List's workload. At this moment, her eyes blurred. A big colorful fish swam through the giant kelp forest. Achi's eyes suddenly lit up. It's that big dolphin. She had found the giant kelp forest by chasing this dolphin-like sea monster. But in the end, the sea monster ran away and she failed to catch it. At this time, she directly followed it and decided to hunt the sea monster again. With the help of the giant kelp, Achi's big white shell quietly followed the sea monster from afar. The relaxed sea monster did not find her and swam around leisurely, occasionally chasing the surrounding fish. It completely regarded the giant kelp forest as an amusement park, happy and content. Little did it know that danger was approaching. However, just as Achi was about to attack and kill the sea monster, she suddenly stopped and hid behind a few giant kelps. She did not expose herself and quietly observed. In her vision, the dolphin-like sea monster seemed to want to attack a giant kelp. However, before it got close, a faint yellow light flashed on its body, and then tiny giant kelps grew out of its skin and wrapped around it. The sea monster had to rush to the rocks next to it and scrape off the giant kelps. Then it unwillingly circled around and wanted to attack again, but was blocked by the yellow light several times. In the end, its body was covered with giant kelps, and it unwillingly swam into the depths of the giant kelp forest. It's a giant kelp sprite, a giant kelp sprite. Achi was very surprised. She had just contracted a giant kelp sprite with List an hour ago. She did not expect to meet another one. The clever Achi immediately remembered that List had said that the magic ingredient giant kelp forest was very large and had not been completely explored. So it was not surprising to find another giant kelp sprite. She firmly remembered the position of this giant kelp sprite's worm stalk, and then chased after the colorful sea monster. Unfortunately, Chapter 536. The rainbow-colored dolphin sea monster disappeared, leaving Achi a bit anxious. She was not anxious because she could not kill it, but rather because she was afraid that the sea monster would find other sprite worms and eat them. At present, 3 sprite worms and 2 lesser sprites had been found in the kelp forest. It was difficult to guarantee that there would not be other sprite worms. The entire kelp forest sprites belonged to her big brother List. They could not be defiled by the sea monster. After carefully searching around, she still could not find any trace of the sea monster. She could only comfort herself. This sea monster should not be targeting the sprites. It might just be curious about the sprites. I have never heard my big brother say that there are animals that feed on sprites, nor have I read about it in books. Moreover, finding a sprite worm was very difficult. The sea monster might not be able to find a second sprite. Sea monsters do not have magic eyes. She gently swam among the kelp, feeling a bit regretful. Unfortunately, Achi is not a knight and has no chi, so she cannot cultivate magic eyes. Otherwise, Achi could help my big brother quickly find all the sprites and potions in the sea. Magic eyes was Achi's secret skill that could only be cultivated by a knight. Wizards naturally could not cultivate it. After searching around, the sky was completely dark. She returned to her previous position and observed the new kelp lesser sprite for a moment, before leaving the kelp forest and swimming towards Mangrove Island. On Mangrove Island, Nami was holding a newly hatched mallard, waiting for Achi's return. Sometimes Achi would take Nami with her, but because she had to raise the ducklings, Nami now spent half of her nights on Mangrove Island. She also liked Mangrove Island very much. After all, it was born here. Seeing the shell float up from the mangrove forest, Nami immediately put down the ducklings and happily flew up, shouting "tweet" as she rushed towards the shell. When Achi flew out of the shell, it just happened to rush into her embrace. "Nami, Big Brother List has brought you a new companion." Tweet. Gulu. Without needing Achi's introduction, Fitz emerged from the shell and bared his teeth at Nami. His sharp teeth instantly scared Nami into hiding in Achi's bosom. "Fitz, you are not allowed to scare Nami." Gulp. Fei-Zi turned his head and bared his teeth at Achi. Even though he was a mother, it didn't mean that Fei-Zi would submit to Achi, unless she took out the jade powder. Slurp slurp. After getting the jade powder, Fitz no longer provoked Nami. He just quietly licked the jade powder. Nami also plucked up her courage and began to look at Fitz. She even chirped at Achi from time to time. Achi explained in a low voice, "It doesn't have wings because it's an elf in the sea. Elves in the sea have fins but no wings. Look at its fins. Don't they look similar to Achi's fins?" There were also transparent fins behind Achi's ears and back. In fact, the spirits of the sea and the spirits of the sea were very similar. After a while, Fitz had already finished eating the jade powder. When he saw Nami looking at him, he began to grimace. However, Nami, who already knows that it can't fly, is no longer afraid of it. It turns around and flies away. In the blink of an eye, he took out 2 peanut nougats from the leaves of his worm stalk. Chirp. She handed a peanut nougat to Fitz. Gulp. Fitz was stunned. He sniffed and then reached out to take the peanut nougat. Seeing Nami stuffing the peanut nougat into her mouth and chewing on it, she also did the same. However, after eating 2 mouthfuls, he spat out the peanut nougat and threw away the candy in his hand. He grimaced again. Nami pursed her lips and turned back to communicate with Achi with chirp. Then Achi took out some jade powder and handed it to him. She immediately grabbed the jade powder and flew to Fitz for the second time. The next scene was as expected. Fitz, who was eating the jade powder, didn't resist Nami at all. He let Nami touch the small giant algae on his head. Achi watched from the side and felt it was very interesting. Nami was really a smart elf who was good at making friends. Another kelp sprite? Early the next morning, after meeting with Achi, List was shocked. "As I expected, there are too many elves hidden in this giant algae forest. By the way, can you find the colorful dolphin you mentioned? I'm very interested in it." If you can catch it, try not to kill it. After being surprised by the elf, he began to suspect that the colorful dolphin was probably a low-level dragon-type sea monster mentioned in the smoke mission. The colorful big fish looked like a dolphin, which was very suitable for a dragon-type beast. The chocobo Loki also had colorful feathers. Anyway, a new day of searching began. First, he let Achi take him to the place where the giant algae elf's worm stalk was. The same routine, the same result. The greedy giant algae elf couldn't resist the temptation of the jade powder at all. List took the opportunity to stretch out his finger and kiss it successfully. After emerging from the water, List was very proud. Achi, these elves are really tempting. Brother, if it's Nami, it won't be so easily tempted. Achi told him in detail how Nami became friends with Fitz yesterday. Really, Nami is so cute. But I don't agree with you. Maybe I don't need to contract with her. Nami will take the initiative to approach me and then contract with me, just like she took the initiative to contract with you. Achi was stunned. Suddenly she felt that it might be true. Nami was an elf who liked to make friends. Just as they were talking, a fight suddenly broke out in the shell. It was Fitz and the new giant algae elf. They didn't like each other, so they directly fought in the water, punching and biting each other. It was a very fierce fight. Stop. List immediately stopped them. The two elves didn't dare to disobey, but they still stared at each other and bared their teeth. Although they were born in the same giant algae forest, and their species and appearance were similar, the two little guys were obviously not gregarious. They dared to fight as soon as they met. What a short temper. From now on you are not allowed to fight, let alone bully any elf. Do you hear me, Fitz, and you? I'll call you Tam, meaning River King. As for why you have this name, seeing that you have a bad temper, you will definitely be a tyrant of the Castle Canal in the future. Fitz and Tam continued to stare at each other. Due to the power of the contract, they could not refuse List's orders and did not dare to fight again. Time ticked by and a day came to an end. The magic ingredient giant algae's range was finally determined. It was about 250 hectares in size. Of course, not every hectare was filled with magic ingredient giant algae. There were also many ordinary giant algae mixed in. The output of these magic ingredient giant algae was definitely not lower than the output of the fast-growing magic thorns. List observed with magic eyes that the magic ingredient giant algae was not only huge, but also had a high concentration of magic power. The amount of magic ingredient extracted from a single plant was incomparable to that of ordinary magic ingredients. Achi, we still need to continue searching in this magic ingredient giant algae. According to my calculations, there should be at least 2 sprite worms here. Moreover, I already have a rough estimate of their general location. Previously, List, riding on Loki, carefully drew the distribution range of the magic ingredient giant algae as well as the location of 3 of its worm stalks. According to the location of the 3 worm stalks, he drew a circular range and found that it was impossible to cover all of the magic ingredient giant algae. He carefully calculated the range that was not covered by the worm stalks and came to the conclusion that only 2 sprite worms' worm stalks could satisfy the distribution of the magic ingredient giant algae. This was a scientific calculation. The accuracy was very high. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.